Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host Kevin Jacobson here with my annual Best Picture breakdown. This is a brief return to the old format, the original series of And the Runner-Up Is, where I covered Best Picture races, and as I do every summer, we'll be discussing the most recent Oscar year, where I pick All Quiet on the Western Front as the likely runner-up that lost Best Picture to Everything Everywhere All at Once. And my guest today is someone who you've heard before on a bonus episode, an episode of For My Consideration about Gone Girl, which is a very fun episode. But now she's making the jump up to the main show, editor-in-chief of Oscars Central. Welcome back to the show, Kenzie Vanunu.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited that I went from like one of my favorite actress races to a big real main episode dissecting quite an Oscar season.
Yes, a lot to go over again. Like, we're a few months, actually several months past the Oscars by this point, so excited to sort of bring up some old, I don't know, some would say traumas, some would say a very exciting Best Picture race, you know, a lot of fun movies in the mix this year. So yeah, do you have anything you wanted to just bring up before we get started?
You said trauma, and it's so fitting because Jamie Lee Curtis was involved with this Oscar season. I was looking back at it over the last week trying to prepare, and it feels like it was 9 years ago, but also yesterday. This season felt like it went on so long. I was like, was this 2 days ago or was this 7 years ago? Like, crazy season. I'm actually excited to talk about it again because once it was over, I was kind of like, I never want to talk about this again. So I haven't really thought about it at all since it ended. So I'm excited to dive into it with you.
Yeah, that's why I like doing the Best Picture episode several months after the Oscars, because it feels like we can have a little bit of perspective now. Maybe we're not so heightened in our emotions. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the discussion brings out of us.
I'm like, we're saying that now, and let's wait till we get to me talking about Tar, and it's...
Oh, yes.
And then we'll see how I feel, that if I'm excited
and also,
or...
like, The Whale.
The Whale.
Remember The Whale? Anyway.
No one does.
More on that later. Okay, so let's get into a description here of All Quiet on the Western Front. So it is a German anti-war film based on the novel of the same name by Erich Maria Remarque. And the film takes place during World War I as we follow a young German soldier named Paul and his experiences enlisting in the war and fighting on the front lines, seeing his friends die, befriending an older soldier named Kat, and it's just basically seeing his innocence die in the wake of all the bloodshed. And we also are flashing back and forth with the men who are involved in the armistice negotiations, which is a new addition that wasn't in the original text. So the film was directed by Edward Berger, who co-wrote the adaptation with Leslie Patterson and Ian Stokell. It stars Felix Kammerer as Paul, Albrecht Schuch as Kat, Daniel Bruhl, and many, many more. And because this was a Netflix release, All Quiet on the Western Front does not have box office numbers to report on, but apparently through March there were 150 million hours logged of the film, according to Netflix, whatever that means. And it was nominated for 9 Academy Awards, winning 4, pretty good haul, but not Best Picture. So, Kenzie, very curious to hear your thoughts on All Quiet on the Western Front, especially in terms of when you saw the film and just, you know, kind of like exploring how it really ascended into the race to such a position that it could conceivably be called a runner-up.
I'm really lucky because I live in LA, so we have a Netflix theater. So I've only ever seen it in a theater, which is kind of crazy considering...
Wow. Privileged.
Yes. If you live in LA, the Bay Theater at not to promote a Caruso shopping center, but it's at the Pacific Palisades Village. Great theater. It's only like $12, which for LA for a ticket is a steal.
Pretty good.
But I saw it I think it was like the end of October last year, so it was before its steep stock rise. But I had heard from a lot of people at TIFF that saw it that were like, what is Netflix doing? Like, this is their golden ticket and Netflix was not really acting on it. I did love it, but I grew up I read the book in school, so I was very familiar with the text. But I am not a war film girly, anti-war, pro-war, anything. It's not my genre. But I did really like it. I thought that the performances really sold it, and I did really like the inclusion of the politicians negotiating that ceasefire. But I thought it was like a technical player. I'm not gonna lie. Like I was like, I'm sure adapted screenplay, because it did feel really weak, adapted screenplay.
Very weak.
But I never was like watching it like this is gonna be the number 2. Like I never foresaw my panic attack of like, is All Quiet winning? Like
as the night was going on,
45 minutes into the telecast, like didn't see that coming.
You kept hearing that same theme over and over again.
I was like,
it's like, oh no,
the Sean Kingston
foreboding.
What was the Sean Kingston song that it sounds like? The 911.
Oh.
It sounds exactly like that.
Yeah.
But I was really like fixated on Felix's performance, especially because you're with him the entire film. And I really appreciated that more so. And I hate to compare it to 1917, but I just never.
It's inevitable.
I never connected with that performance or like that character the same way as this character. And I think that was really a combination of Edward Berger's direction and also the screenplay, obviously, but really Felix's performance. I was not a fan. Like, I like the score, but the way people walked out of it at TIFF, like, you've never heard a score like this. I was like, it's not that score. But, and I had not seen Babylon at that point, so I didn't know what was coming, but.
Yeah, that's the one you walk out of being like, now
that's a score
you've never heard before. Yeah.
But I did really love it, and I ended up seeing it 2 more times in theaters before the Oscars. But it's weird because I've never really felt this is the most important film of the year conversation that I felt with so many other films I had seen at that point. But I did really like it. Really broke through for me as a film that like I typically would not be interested in. Like I would see to check the box of I saw this movie
as a completist.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
There's only a couple movies each year that slip through the fingers. I'm so sorry to every Marvel film that gets a nomination. But I did definitely think, because I was not very high on Glass Onion, I definitely was like, this is the movie they should be pushing. But it was fine. It was actually originally like I think it was like I ranked it like 13 by the end of the year. But you asked me that now, I don't think that it would be up there.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's a movie. It's a movie. Like it passes the Harry Styles test.
There we go.
Yes.
Speaking to another interesting narrative thread in film in 2022. So for me, when I first watched the film, I knew it was getting pretty good buzz, and I think I knew by that point it was probably going to be Germany's entry for the international race, and then it was readily available on Netflix. I didn't see it in a theater, unfortunately, but the idea of like, this is a new adaptation of a previous Best Picture winner too. I was interested in seeing it just in general, especially like this being its original language of the characters from the book. I never anticipated that it would do as well as it did at the Oscars, let alone us talking about this as the potential runner-up. But the reason I bring all that up is because I think once a film does get those kinds of accolades and attention and is now winning multiple Oscars, I think it can sort of change a little bit of the perception in a way that maybe on your first watch you have solid expectations for it, but you might not be anticipating that, as you said, like this is going to be like one of the best films of the year, very important, that sort of thing. But then once it did get the nominations and the wins, I do think like a certain expectation was set up for people who hadn't caught it on the first watch, like I saw from some friends that like once they were watching it after the nominations, it was kind of like, oh, that's it, that sort of thing.
I've seen this before.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I just found that interesting. I don't know if there's a correlation there, but either way, I was pretty surprised just on a film level how visceral it is, especially on that first watch. The sound design is pretty incredible, and like really, I imagine in a theater even more so, just like putting you right alongside these men. Basically, you feel the violence and you feel the guns that are like ringing out everywhere, and just even the body horror is just very realistic. And yeah, I think having Felix Kammerer, I think he's really very impressive as Paul, and I do agree, better than George Mackay. Not to make a direct 1-to-1 there, but just having that great sort of haunted face, like that's like face, half the battle.
Yeah, his face is like, when they're like zooming in on like the effect it has on a soldier, it is Felix's face, and I feel like he really does so much with it that it's impossible to not walk away thinking about him. The mud, exactly. The image, the mud that the
caked on mud. Oh my god, yeah. And the fact that this is his debut performance on film, which I didn't even remember like before I was doing research again, like that's incredible to me. But you know, the anti-war message I think is hammered home in a way that is sometimes a little redundant. And you know, I think at other times, like there's a few scenes I'm thinking about, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that are pretty profound. So yeah, I also thought on that first watch that the contrasting with the German armistice stuff and Daniel Bruhl and those more dialogue heavy scenes, I thought that was very compelling side by side to show the differences and how like these men just have no consideration for the men who are risking their lives and just like putting them through hell to essentially like, you know, appease their own egos more than anything else. I thought all that was a really interesting perspective change from the novel and the original film. So I walked away pretty positive on it. This rewatch for this week didn't hold up for me as well, to be honest. I still think most of those things that I mentioned are positives and still true. Like it's still a very immersive experience. I do think that the film goes so far in beating you over the head with just like the horror of it all that sometimes for me it tends to lose a bit of humanity, and some of the heart of the original I think is a little bit missing. I also think personally on this rewatch that some of those high command scenes don't work as well. Like I think if you excise some of those or cut them down a little bit, it'd be more effective, more tight, and just sort of having more momentum with Paul and his story, if we're not just like cutting away to random moments in his narrative. So yeah, I don't think it's perfect, but it's still a very, you know, impactful experience, especially the first time you watch it. So did you have any further thoughts just on some of the technical craft of it? Because I think that's the sort of highlight for me of the film, more so than the story.
The sound in a theater, and then I know my husband didn't see it in a theater. I made him watch it at home, and he wore headphones to watch it. So he was like, I felt like even though he was at home and like watching it, you know, like there's like you can't really commit to a theater experience at home. So he was like with the glare of the lights or whatever, but he was like, you really felt like you were in it the way that they did the sound, and it's really impressive, especially like given the film's budget, which obviously I take with a grain of salt with anything with Netflix, because will we ever really know? But it's just really impressive, like the scope of it, the way that the film it obviously like dials in on like Paul's like story, but it's like it feels really large scale anyway, even though you can kind of tell, especially rewatching it, like you can tell that it's not like the full scale that like something like 1917 was. Like you can tell it didn't have that budget, but it's like it's still so impressive. Like I will obviously talk about one of its Oscar wins that I do not agree with, but it is impressive. It's just I still don't get it, the production design that is but the sound is really what stays with me, and also the cinematography. I still remember watching it and opening with just like the calm of the nature that surrounds them, and the way that it also like bookends with that is really beautiful, and just like it really speaks to the soldier's experience. And I did think it was really beautiful, and the way that the camera just follows him is so, I'm always aware of like his perspective, but also like things he can't see, which I think is really important when telling like a specific soldier's story. I also really love the costume design, like the more I read about it.
Yeah.
And I was really like because I too fall victim to, do we really need to award something costume design for like uniforms? But the detail in the uniforms is really impressive the more I read about it. And just like the cutting to from like what the soldiers were eating to like them on the train and what they were eating was really impressive. And the sound is always going to be, because especially with war films, it's not so much the fighting sequences, but like the aftermath of the fighting. Like I think the sound that really sticks with me is when he's in the, I don't want to call it a crater, but with the guy.
Yeah.
Like that sound work is really crazy because of the mud. It's just like what is going on there. And I think that's something that, like, especially proving a point of anti-war discussions, it's really something that needs to stay with you. That's really highly disturbing. And they really did a great job at that. But yeah, the production design, we'll get into that technical aspect of it.
I mean, not to put up a defense for that win because I disagree with it, but like I do think they had to make like all the trench warfare stuff by hand, essentially.
Yeah.
They had a lot was going into at least the battle sequences. Like this, obviously it's not going to be a big indoor friendly showcase necessarily that is a traditional production design winner, but I don't know, I sort of like the win, even if I don't agree with it, in the sense that it feels a little bit different than what we would normally get in that category. But I think part of that is just liking the film more than anything else in that particular category, which tends to just like raise it up in every category. That's just how the Oscars seem to operate these days, but that's a whole other topic. For me, the score is interesting. I do think it is very obtrusive at times and repetitive. There are moments when I think it does provide a good contrast, though, like when the men are marching in the beginning and singing, and then the underscore makes it feel like essentially these men who are so proud of serving their country and everything in the moment are also basically marching to their doom. That's kind of the effect that it has. So I think when it is playing with those contrasts, I think it works really well. I do think the sort of 3-note thing does get old, especially, on a rewatch. I think it's just is like, we get it.
I think it's really impressive the first time you watch it, like, and like you were talking about when they're first walking, you're like, wow, this is so different and like unexpected. But because the score itself is so repetitive, if you ever rewatch it, it really loses like steam right away. Like I'm like, it takes
me out of it every time.
I'm like, I get it. Like
yeah, so that is for me the win that I quibble with the most of its 4 wins. But I can see why it's obviously you leave the film remembering the score, so at least that's something. Are there particular sequences that you wanted to highlight that you found particularly profound? Because there's one you mentioned, obviously, like you said, in the sort of crater.
That sequence really just like, it not only like obviously humanizes like a soldier, because he is seeing this other soldier from the opposite side as like a person with a life that he's also wanting to go home to. But it's just like, it just really hits home, especially with the added sequences of all the politicians and upper people, like that these soldiers never really know what they're getting into, and they only realize it once it's far too late. And that meant so much more watching it, especially like rewatching it. It's just like, it really never loses its emotional impact, and like him wanting to save him after literally trying to kill him and ending up he's responsible. And it's just, the look on Paul's face from that moment on is so different, because it's like, even if he has killed before, like he killed this man up close and saw his life, like he was gripping to his life. I thought that was really well done. And another sequence that I just really love is honestly in the beginning, like all of the guys, like when they're so excited and like so proud of their country. I think that something like that, I do wonder if this movie came out like at the peak of the country turning on like the Iraq and Afghanistan war, if maybe this could have actually really won more and done more at the Oscars, because that sense of nationalism would have impacted people a little more, because that it would be so fresh here. But it's just really jarring to see like kids, like he lied about his parents signing off on him. Just seeing that, knowing what is to come, is so daunting and horrible. And I really like the way it was shot. And it's just when the uniform, like he's like, this is someone else's uniform, and they just rip it off. It is just so, it's really well done to show you just how awful they're getting into it is. But for me, I think those are the two big scenes, because everything else is more of just like a running narrative. Like they focus a lot on like the feet of the soldiers, and you kind of see them throughout time, like the beginning of his like clean shoes to like the very end. It's really just a daunting experience, but those two scenes just really messed me up good and stay with me. Like even on a rewatch, they really do work. So
definitely. Yeah, I also really like the scene where they're at the farm and it's him and Kat, and I think Kat like can't read or something. Paul is reading to him the letter from his wife, and there's this allusion to their son being dead and something like I'm visiting our little boy's grave soon, like that. And just like Albrecht Schroek and his performance, I think, is another key emotional center for me that I really respond to. And him just listening to the letter from his wife is surprisingly affecting for someone you haven't really fully gotten to know fully yet. And also him just like voicing his frustration that when they all get home, like all anyone's gonna want to know is if he was in close combat, and how like he already knows that he'll be a shell of himself essentially when he reintegrates into society. I think that sort of thematic thread of it is it's an interesting sort of wrinkle into just like the constant battling and the flashing back and forth. Like for me, that's the scene that really affects me the most about what this war is going to do to him and so many others, you know?
He was in my personal supporting actor lineup. I thought his performance was just so great. That scene is so just the look on his face where he's like computing how he would like to respond to her, and like you could tell he was already putting on like a front, like he wasn't going to let his wife see the way this was like impacting him. And I also like that he puts on like a different front with Paul. Like he also doesn't want to fully let him see him be emotional, even though it's such a private moment. And I also just like that the setting of that is them on the bathroom, like going to the bathroom. It's really funny. But it's like they had to take their moments where they got them, and I think that really also dialed that part of it in. Also them when he's talking to him about he's going to be like a cobbler again, he's like, you need to go back to college, you need to continue your education, like you don't have to be like I'm going to be. I think that it showed like the two sets of people returning home from war. Like Paul could have all these opportunities still, yet he wasn't going to. That's a really great scene too. I love both of those performances so much. It's so great. I was really happy that Edward Berger like brought them up for the international one, because I was like, I wanted something for them, like anything.
Yeah, I mean, maybe with a few more weeks, you know, of, I don't know, nominations, like if the nominations happened a few weeks later.
Don't even pretend to delay the Oscars anymore. That season went
That's
on.
true.
So long.
Well, it could have been like 2020 where it was like in April, but anyway.
At the train station?
Yes, exactly. I also think the scene where one of the other soldiers, I forget his name, but one of the soldiers is lying down and he stabs himself in the throat with the fork because he just can't take the fact that he was injured, essentially, is another one of those really shocking moments where that's a good example of something where like a very big action has been taken, but also I think, Edward Berger and company know to not have to do like some kind of swelling strings
Yeah.
orchestral moment to give you the impact of it. Like, even though I've been talking about how the score can be kind of obtrusive at times, there also are moments where I think some restraint is shown. They know how to let a moment sell itself, if that makes sense.
For sure. Especially like that moment was really like unexpected. Like I was really like taken aback by it, and I was really thankful that, like you said, the score wasn't like in the background.
Right. Yeah. I do just want to drill down a little bit more on just the stuff with Daniel Bruhl and everything that's going on there. I think for me, just a more interesting version of this concept would just be if we do that in the beginning and we do that a little bit more towards the end. I just feel like, some of those middle sections, it just, for me, doesn't really work as well. That's kind of like when I start to tune out of the film, if I'm being honest. I don't know. What do you think? Because you said you're a little more positive on it.
I'm positive on it, but like you said, where it's like the book ending, like it's showing at the beginning, like contrasting with them gearing up so happy to go, whereas like in the background the politicians already know that they're sending them to just die. Like they have no anticipation of them returning. It is in the middle where it not only like just feels like it's like breaking up the momentum of the film, but it does feel like at times he's doing it to really modernize it to what's going on in our times now with like Russia and just in general in the US, like the politicians just only caring about their image. But I do really like it at the end, just showing like how close it came to, because you can really, I think it's Daniel Bruhl who brings up his character that brings up like, if like every second we're delaying it, like we're losing more and more people. And it really does show, because they tie it back to the characters you've been with the whole film. Like they're so close to getting home, yet they end up not making it because these men like sat on their hands eating their fresh croissants. Like it really does like hammer home like that every minute counts, and these men just don't see that. But it is in the middle where it really like, it just feels like really heavy handed in the middle, like showing off like their wealth and showing off just like how comfortable they are, like that they're not even thinking about these men, these boys, like these teenagers literally. But I do think it was a really good addition, because I haven't studied this in so long, but in school we read about just like all the, I mean, it's so stupid to say like fake news, but like all of the way that like the German, like I'm not even sure like which parties it was, but that they like started telling the people that like the liberal agenda was like to end the war, and they really had the opportunity to win. And I just think that like he was trying to sneak that in because it's like so relevant to what is going on. But I was like, it's fine. It just felt like in the middle, it does really break it up, and it's just like unnecessary. And it was like one of those things like last year, it just felt, and I actually do really enjoy longer movies, but like when it's like utilized well, and it did feel like this movie doesn't need to be like 3 hours long, and it's like those added scenes kind of like, I'm thinking about the German, I don't know his title, the older general, is he a general?
Yeah,
like they're showing him eat dinner and like feed his dog. I'm like, I don't need this.
like I get it,
but we already covered this theme. Like it just felt very repetitive.
Redundant. Yeah. That's why I think that same character, I think, is at the end telling them that they still have to fight, even though the war is ending that day, because they want one like German victory at the end of the run. So I think that just really speaks to like the pettiness of it, and the sort of the futility also of the men who decide these things and their egos. I feel like, just having that is enough of a glimpse into that side of it, that everything in the middle is kind of, I don't know, a little superfluous to me. Like it's one of those things where I get it on paper and I like it as a concept for this story in particular, but I don't know if there was maybe a better way to integrate that a little more. I don't know how that would be. Like honestly thinking about it though, like because Oppenheimer is on the brain, like that's kind of like something that I would like to see, like that sort of editing style maybe a little bit to have it flow a little better. I don't know, because that's a movie
like
that really
actually
bounces
a
back.
really great comparison, because I feel like Oppenheimer has a lot of those scenes where it's like just explaining things or making a concept feel really like relevant to our time. But I never felt that lagging in Oppenheimer, and I didn't really feel like it like broke up the movie in any sense of way. Whereas like I do feel like specifically, like you pointed out in the middle section of All Quiet, it was like, I don't like, I think if you took some of those scenes out, I don't really think it would make a difference narrative wise.
No. Yeah.
So it's like, if I can take out a scene that's not disrupting the movie at all, I think we didn't really need it.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's that. But do you have any thoughts also just on the ending itself? Because that is another thing that is quite a gut punch, to have the reveal that, spoiler, I guess, he does die, as he does in every adaptation of it. But, it's a century-old book. But the way it's done, what do you think?
The way it's done is actually what's really just, I mean, it hammers home the every minute counts, and how petty this man was for sending it, especially because they show Paul when the general, sorry for anyone upset that I don't remember this man's name. But when he's speaking, the camera hones in on Paul, just so miserable at the thought of going, like, he's seen it firsthand, everything that's happening. They're so close to going home, and he's just like, I can't believe this. And it's just like, it's exactly what an anti-war movie needs to do, which is, you're the man you've been following. He's so close, and he gets the rug pulled out from under him, just dies at the last second. And to be just like, he's alive and can hear the end of the war and everyone leave. It's just so brutal. And I think it was really well done, and I did like the way it was done. And it also is another thing, like, this guy can act so much with just the expression on his face, because that's all you needed to see. And he really just like hit every emotion that the audience was feeling, as well as Paul himself. And I did really like it. And I loved the way that after that, it ended exactly with the way it started, but you just have such a different perspective on the nature surrounding him at this point. I thought it was really well done, and I wouldn't have put him in my lineup, but I cannot believe that Edward Berger didn't get nominated for director, especially that last sequence. Like, it's so well done, and I do think that it could, because there are a lot of scenes in the film that feel very heavy-handed. I don't think that was one of them. I thought it was really like, they allowed Paul to have his moment, and it was just it really worked for me.
Yeah, and I'm actually curious if, you said you watched it in a theater. Do you remember the audience response to that?
So the first time I saw it, the Netflix theater is an old Cinépolis. So it's like the big chairs, and it's not that many. So there were actually only 4 other people in the movie theater when I saw it. And there was like this one older guy. He was like reacting to everything the whole movie. He was like, and when Paul got shot, he was like, like, he did it like repeatedly. And I was like, oh no. But it was actually like really funny. Like, the second time I saw it at it was like a Netflix event for it, and people were still acting like they had no idea what was gonna happen. And I was very curious, like, because I think it was like February. It was an Oscar player at this point, and it was like full. And I was like, did you guys not watch this? You waited till Netflix invited you? Like, I was like very confused. But people were really shocked. And when I took my parents to see it, they read the book and saw the original American film. They were like very shocked, and my dad was like, and I was like, did we not, like, doesn't he? But people are shocked every time.
Yeah. I guess that speaks to the power of the film, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, like, you're like, oh no, they're not going to kill him. Like, he's getting out this time.
Sure. Like, it's the last day, last hour, So, yeah, it is definitely a gut punch. I don't know why, but like, I didn't watch it for the first time that long ago, but like, I forgot that there was a little bit more after that, like with the other soldier and like taking the dog tag and everything. I completely had blocked that out of my mind for some reason. Like, my memory was just that like he died and that was it.
Like,
so Right. Just like
Edward
solemn
Berger.
credits. Right. No, but just the actual ending, I thought, was a really nice bit of like a very nice poetic ending in a movie that sometimes for me doesn't always feel entirely poetic as the, original Best Picture winner or the book. The ending, I think, really clinches it for me. And it's probably why it was as successful as it was, is because it really just packs such a punch.
The dog tags. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Because it's also a bookend to Paul finding his friend's glasses and taking. Wow.
Yeah.
What an ending.
Yeah. That's All Quiet on the Western Front. Did you have any other stray observations you wanted to make before we talk about the Oscars of it all?
No, I think that's it. It's like I said, rewatching it. I think I've rewatched it 3 times now since the initial time. I just think it like loses its impact upon rewatch.
Yeah.
For me personally.
Yeah, and I mean the same happened for me with 1917, which I personally was a fan of. But
ever seen 1917 once.
I
was just not into it, and was like, that's that.
Fair enough.
Beautiful gowns.
Yes. Okay, well, All Quiet on the Western Front is readily available on Netflix still. I mean, streaming is tenuous, so who's to say how this will age? But as of now, you can watch it, and there's also a nice making of short documentary on there that you can find that's really gets into all the crazy amount of work that went into putting this film together. So, and on a somewhat limited budget. Like you said, we don't know like the full numbers, but like, it wasn't 1917, to bring it back to that.
Yes.
So anyway, when we come back, we will be discussing why All Quiet on the Western Front lost Best Picture, why Everything Everywhere All at Once won, and all about this fascinating Best Picture lineup.
Once again, here are the nominees for Best Picture. All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar, The Way of Water, The Banshees of Inisherin, Elvis, Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Fabelmans, Tar, Top Gun Maverick, Triangle of Sadness, Women Talking. And the Oscar goes to Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
And we're back. So now we'll be discussing All Quiet on the Western Front at the Oscars. It was nominated for 9 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, Best Original Score, Best Production Design, Best Sound, Best Visual Effects, and Best International Feature Film. And it won for Cinematography, Score, Production Design, and International Feature Film. So before the Oscars, All Quiet on the Western Front won the BAFTA for Best Film, and that was a pretty big one. And what's wild is that it pretty much didn't get any other Best Picture nominations like at all before the Oscars. I think it got like one or two critic citations, but otherwise just in terms of Best Picture, pretty much nothing else. But then Everything Everywhere All at Once won the Critics' Choice. It won Screen Actors Guild. It won Producers Guild. It won a huge group of critics awards. Independent Spirit, Los Angeles Film Critics, like nominated everywhere. Like it was the player of the season. So here we can talk about our feelings on Everything Everywhere and tie it into why it won and why All Quiet lost. So obviously it was one of the big sweepers of the year. In quite some time in terms of winning 7 Oscars. It's something we don't see often in the modern era, including 3 of the 4 acting awards, director, screenplay. It was the true movie of the moment, you could say, even when it wasn't always clear in 2022 that the Oscar voters would respond to it in like such a hard sci-fi concept too. Seemingly young skewing, like dealing in the multiverse. Like this isn't exactly like Schindler's List or Patton or whatever, the kind of thing that people expect would appeal to Academy voters, but it did. Premiered at South by Southwest, released in April, and people really responded to it on a high level. And it became A24's highest grossing film of all time by a wide margin. And, you know, it's like we have this renewed love of Michelle Yeoh. We have the comeback of Ke Huy Quan, rising star Stephanie Hsu, Jamie Lee Curtis kind of being like the cheerleader of it all. So I think we might disagree a little bit on this one, which is not uncommon with this movie, to be clear. But I'll let you voice your thoughts, actually, in terms of why you think Everything Everywhere was our Best Picture winner and what was your response to the film.
I just want to be clear before anyone yells at me on Twitter.
Oh boy.
I am happy it won Best Picture. Like, I wouldn't have voted for it. I wouldn't have ranked it in my top 5 probably of the lineup. No, I'd probably do 5. But it's just not for me. I'm not like a sci-fi girly, so that's the aspect of it that really didn't work for me. But the reason why I think it won is because I think like the emotional notes of it, and I haven't seen this in so long, so I cannot remember any of the characters' name other than Evelyn, between Michelle Yeoh and Stephanie Hsu, and then also Michelle Yeoh's character and Ke Huy Quan's character. I think that like a lot of people watch that movie and can relate to one of those stories, or just the immigrant experience story of she doesn't like feel like she's achieved this American dream that she was supposed to achieve per her parents. But I think there's like an emotional note for everyone essentially when you're watching it, because you can be Michelle Yeoh's character, you can be Stephanie Hsu's character, you can be Ke Huy Quan's character. Like there's something.
Can you be Jamie Lee Curtis's character?
You know,
maybe if you're like an IRS agent, I don't know.
maybe that's the group of the Academy that we're counting out, or the accountants.
There you go.
But I think there's like an emotional connection for everyone, and like that's the part of the film that worked for me. And I'm a little lower on the film than most people, and I do think that's what really, between that and then also just like you can feel the love for the craft in every aspect of the movie when you're watching it. Especially given, like, I don't think that film, when you watch that film, I'm always a little shocked learning about the budget because it feels so much bigger scale than its budget. And I think that's because every single person who worked on it is really passionate about what they do. And like that really comes together when you watch the movie. Like I just don't narratively like the movie, but I like the way it's constructed and like the way that it was brought to the screen. It's just the sci-fi for me. It's not like the hot dog fingers, just like
a step too far, perhaps.
It was a step too far for me. No.
What about Raccacoonie?
Raccacoonie I did love because I was a Gleek. So
oh wow, okay. Yeah. Well, so you're in good company here. Yay.
So anything we can do to get former members of Glee, like other than Leah Michele, like that yes. I am always going to be. Raccacoonie was actually really funny to me. I like that part. But yeah, I've only seen the movie twice also. Like I saw it initially in theaters. It was like right before it came out, so the only hype that had been really out there was out of South by, which at the time was just like, it's just a South by movie that people really like. It wasn't like on the trajectory that it ended up on. And I was a little mixed on it, especially because I saw it in Alamo, so they do the programming before, and it was like In the Mood for Love and The Matrix, and I was like, oh my god. And then I was like, I think that put me too high up.
Yeah, that's fair.
I rewatched it at home like that summer, and I felt lower on it on a rewatch, so I was like, I'm just gonna back up. I think that maybe this year, like later in the year, I'll give it a rewatch, just to see if I change my mind at all. But I do think like the emotional, I think that people, myself included, doubted its Oscar potential because of its sci-fi elements and just that it's very out there. But I think that didn't hinder it because the emotional notes of the story really carry over. And I think that obviously Jamie Lee Curtis being like an absolute legend, being like, this is the movie of the moment, like Michelle Yeoh did this, Ke Huy Quan, like where has he been, like you need to recognize him, like that obviously really helped. But I think it was just like, if you got people to watch it, people saw something in it that they really like identified and admired and like wanted in movies. And I think that's what carried it over the edge at the end.
Yeah, That's a really good point. I think there's just so much in it, like truly everything, that
All
it's
at
a kind
once.
of yeah, it's like kind of impossible to not attach yourself to one aspect of it, at least, you know. I personally loved it. I was really pretty blown away by it, even like not necessarily even like that multiverse sci-fi element of it, but just that, like you're saying, the core story of the family and just the level of commitment by the cast. I was just really taken with, like, this role of a lifetime for Michelle Yeoh, you know, who I was so happy to see win Best Actress for a role that I think will probably go down as her defining role in film. You know, that's something that doesn't happen often enough at Best Actress. I'll just say that, where it's just like combining every single one of her skills, her martial arts expertise, her, you know, playfulness, her goofiness, her emotional sort of centeredness, just like her ability to carry a film and be a badass. Yeah, I loved it. And so what I think I love about it is just like the fact that it does have such a wild concept with so many goofy elements that could have made this truly one of the worst movies ever made. But I do think that personally, I think the Daniels were able to sort of cohere that message and how it all comes down to love and just like this complicated connection with mothers and daughters and like even like parents and queer children. Yeah, and the idea of like your life being this messy thing where you may have regrets about how you got to this point. You may be wondering what your life could have been if you maybe took a different turn here or there, and just like how easy it is to give yourself over to thinking that nothing matters, which is the whole thing with the Stephanie Shu character, that there isn't anything worth living for, but that there's so much to appreciate about life and how goofy and how weird it is. I don't know. I feel like it's impossible to like talk about this film and praise this film without being kind of corny about it, because it's just very open, like open-hearted and just like heart on its sleeve emotion, and maybe not breaking new ground on some of those themes, but I don't know, just to see it all come together in the way that it does, while also delivering on this wild sort of sci-fi premise that we haven't seen before. The editing is mind-blowing to me. I don't know. I loved it.
I still don't know how this film was edited. Like,
yeah, truly.
Like, that was the one thing I did walk away from it being like thinking Oscar-wise. I was like, they'll never give it best editing because it's so crazy, and I literally don't know how they pulled that off. Like, because you know, it's that case of like what I was really worried with, and we'll obviously touch on this slightly, but I was an Elvis defender, where, you know, when like you're like panicking, you're like, the most editing is going to win editing. This is the only case of like the most editing deserving to win best editing. Like,
agreed.
Because like I just don't know how he did it. Like,
yeah, I don't know how this didn't take like 5 years to edit.
It's crazy. It's so impressive. And I do remember like leaving the movie being like, this is obviously not an Oscar movie, which is hilarious. And then
obviously.
But I was like, the editing, like I was like, they'll never touch the editing because it's like something that like because we always get Bohemian Rhapsody, you know, like something with the most editing, but it's the worst editing. And this was just the case of like the opposite. Like, this is showing who flashy editing can be good, you know? So I was like, wow.
What a concept.
Like, what a concept.
Yeah.
Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm so sorry.
Yikes. Anyway, I get why it doesn't work for some people, or people think it's too much, or maybe even like is trying too hard to impress you at times, but I don't know. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it sort of also emerged on its own merits, you know? Like, yes, eventually it was backed by a great campaign, but it took a while, I think, for it to be thought of as a serious contender. You know?
I still remember, like, right before Venice, it was like the conversation was very much A24 is very confident in The Whale, and like that was the focus for the year. And I was like, because at that point it was like late August, and I was like, everyone is still only talking about Everything Everywhere. Like, what is A24 doing? And I remember having serious conversations being like, A24 can't juggle that many campaigns. They're not gonna do that much. And it's like, I do think that the cast and then the Daniels are the responsible party until A24 really seemed to pick up the steam on it in like late September, early October. I feel like before that, it was just the cast and like the Daniels like carrying that movie like on their backs. They were like, watch our movie. Like, I do think that, and then just like people were really passionate about it. Like, and I know that like that was one of the only movies last year until like award season really started where my offline friends or friends that are online and just not in that movie talk, like they all brought up Everything Everywhere. They were like, I heard about this movie, like, and I just think that that was what really kept it there, not A24, until it was easy for them to build the campaign around what was already being discussed.
Yeah, well, they had this influx of the box office receipts to help that along, I think. But yeah, I like when a film emerges like that because people are responding to it authentically, and not because like what we're expecting Academy voters to like a year in advance. And there's nothing wrong with the many folks out there who do those year in advance predictions, as I know you do at your site. It is fun to track, but I do think it is just kind of refreshing when something just is emerging because people really, really liked it. And it's not like the people involved.
That's one of my favorite things, is to look back at predictions a year in advance of like something that literally wasn't listed anywhere and ends up winning stuff. Like, if anybody
Coda.
really had 2 years in a row for me, just so brutal. Like, 2 years. But you know, like it's so fun, like something like that. And it just shows you that like Oscar bait isn't always what we go for. Like,
or maybe the definition of Oscar bait is changing.
Yes, exactly.
How about that?
Would love.
And so to transition a little bit over to just All Quiet losing, you know, normally with runner-up discussions, when I talk about like why it lost, it's sort of like the film might start as an early front runner, you know, and then it fades, or it's like a critical darling and then the industry has like a different taste. Here, I think it's sort of like The Father almost, which is like, you know, what I decided as the best picture runner-up to Nomadland. That was like this very late breaking contender that clearly showed itself to be like an Academy favorite on the night of the Oscars specifically, like winning Best Actor in an upset, winning Adapted Screenplay over the Best Picture winner. And like here, you know, All Quiet does somewhat of a sweep of the tech categories, but it wasn't really considered like a super serious contender before this outside of BAFTA.
Even with BAFTA, there was that conversation of it missed PGA. It missed, like, there were like all these people like, this doesn't count. It was always going to win there. And I'm like, it was not always going to win there.
I love when people do the mental gymnastics of like dismissing certain wins.
I'm like, are we not like so far past that? Like, especially last year, I was like, before you were saying a movie that came out in March couldn't carry over this way. And I'm like, yet you're saying that this movie missed this one benchmark. Like, it was a time. It was a time online.
Yeah, it really, really was. But, you know, I think All Quiet performed about as well as it could have without also winning, you know, picture and screenplay. Those are the two big ones it could have won. So it's kind of like they both won the night in a way, even though Everything Everywhere clearly had the more impressive sweep for many reasons. But like All Quiet, like you were saying in the beginning, like there was maybe even a potential, like, are we in for a sweep right now? Like, could it actually go all the way and win picture? Some people were thinking it. I saw people tweeting it.
I will say I was very nervous until the envelope was open for Adapted Screenplay because I was such a women talking person. I still think it's one of the best movies of the 2020s so far. I was like, just give me one, like, I just need one thing. Like, be serious. I was very relieved to not hear I was very relieved to hear Hilder's beautiful score finally in that night.
Robbed score, we should
robbed
say.
Score. Should have, whatever. Can't even.
Yeah.
But that was a moment where I was like, there was like, it's not happening. I was like, we're crazy. Like, but I did have the panic because I feel like with All Quiet, it won like 3 in a row or something. And I was like,
yeah,
what is going on? Like, I was like, the bomb, like repeatedly. I was like, oh my God. Like there was
suddenly All Quiet became an Oscar villain and we didn't even
did.
see it coming.
In real time.
Yep. Like I said, I saw the tweets. I saw the panic.
I saw a lot of deleted tweets that
well, yeah.
Remember those.
Yeah. So I don't know. Again, is there like a reason that we think All Quiet lost, or is it just like Everything Everywhere was always going to steamroll?
I do think Everything Everywhere was always going to steamroll, and I think like maybe like you were saying, if All Quiet had peaked a little earlier, or like if voting had happened a little later, but I do still think that like especially with it being a Netflix movie, I feel like it not getting acting and directing specifically, like I think like acting, I saw a lot of people comparing it to like Parasite, because Parasite didn't have any acting nominations, but Parasite had like an actor that like people were familiar with Song Kang-ho, and I feel like there was like a campaign for him, whereas like with All Quiet, like there were people who were like, these are some of the greatest performances of the year, but they weren't like picking up nominations anywhere else really. And I just feel like there was never like a momentum there. And then obviously I think it would have had to win adapted screenplay, and I do think it was a very close number 2. Like I think that was very very close, but I think that there was some ugliness at the end of that campaign from Netflix about women talking, and I think that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I still think there's this Netflix bias. Like I know that Coda won, but like Apple is very different than Netflix, and I think that like I just think there's like this weird thing that it's going to take a while to fizzle out if it gets resolved, or I just don't think it's viewed the same way that I think Coda was viewed on its own and not like a streaming movie. And I do think we were still feeling like the effects of like the way people were watching movies and returning to theaters, and that didn't really like carry the same. But like I don't think it's a mistake that a streaming movie won not from Netflix. Like I think that there's some truth in that. And it's like funny for you, 2 years in a row doing this episode, it's a Netflix movie.
Yeah. And we've also talked about Roma as a runner-up, so like,
there's a pattern.
It's quite a trend. Yeah,
so
it's not like, a coincidence.
And I just think that All Quiet was never going to match the passion that Everything Everywhere had. And at the end of the day, I think people vote passionately, not... I think in the tech categories, people can vote very lazily. I don't think people really do that with Best Picture. Like, I think that's a passion vote. And I don't really think All Quiet had the same fan base that Everything Everywhere had.
The only thing I could see is more traditional voters not really getting Everything Everywhere and feeling like they could rally behind All Quiet, especially kind of like bolstered from the BAFTA win. It's stupid to sort of like characterize people in these big clumps, but like the British vote
the British are coming.
All Quiet. Yes, exactly. So that could have been a thing. Like BAFTA really did not respond well to Everything Everywhere, as you might recall. So I think that's the only thing that, like, if they had more time, maybe more people could be added to that. But yeah, Everything Everywhere just had the heart, it had the technical craft, it had the actor support visibly, like very clearly the actor support. So like it had everything behind it. So just one more question before we get into some Twitter questions and some other talk of the Best Picture nominees here. Do you actually agree with me that All Quiet was the runner-up?
I do, because I think that was like for a long period of time, we were like, who is the runner-up? Because like it was I personally, and I'm very on the record about this, never saw the Fabelmans thing happening. And when that movie wasn't like doing well and it just like wasn't picking up anything and precursors, people were like, well, that's not number 2, it's Banshees. But I was like, Banshees is also not winning absolutely anything. So where is that coming from? And like when you're calculating like a path, it's like other than like Coda as like an outlier, but Coda won all 3 of its nominations. So if it had momentum before, I think it would have had more nominations. Yeah. But it's like All Quiet was really the only one that made sense as having, and a lot of people, when they do their like rankings of the best picture, you would rank All Quiet like in the top half, because it's not so. Especially when you look at like, we had like a lot of people hated Elvis. I want to say all of us hated Triangle of Sadness. Like, there were things that were automatically at the bottom, and it's just like All Quiet was like a neutral middle. So I feel like on a preferential ballot, it would have performed well and given all of its wins. And where I really think it was the runner-up in multiple categories. And I do think Edward Berger was 6 for director. So
for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm glad you agree. I'm glad you affirmed my pick.
Imagine I was like, no, it was Elvis.
No, actually, that's not the truth, Ellen. It was actually Top Gun Maverick. Because that was something that people were talking about.
Remember when I tweeted that Top Gun Maverick was winning 1 or 0 Oscars and I got death threats? Good time. Good time online.
Film Twitter during awards season. Always a blast.
Are we Film X now?
I don't know how that sounds. Maybe we should workshop that. Film X. I don't know. Anyway, let's get to some questions, shall we?
Yes.
Okay. We'll just do some All Quiet and Everything Everywhere, and then we can get into the other Best Picture nominees a little bit. So Greg Adams said, rank some of the artsy war films that the Academy has taken to: All Quiet on the Western Front, 1917, Dunkirk, and The Thin Red Line.
I would go Thin Red Line, Dunkirk, All Quiet, 1917? Is there another one?
No, that was it.
Okay, yeah.
I would have the same, except I would put 1917 above All Quiet.
Ooh,
I like all of them. I like all of them a lot.
I feel like I should rewatch 1917, but I saw it at RIP, the ArcLight Cinerama Dome on New Year's Eve at like 7 p.m. And then I went home to bed before midnight.
Interesting vibe. I like that. What a way to ring in the new year. Yes. Let's see. Glenda Miss Jackson, If You Nasty, Forever, said, where does All Quiet on the Western Front rank for you in Best Picture remakes? You know, remakes or readaptations of other, books, like that sort of thing.
I feel like high, because of like the modern one, like I famously was not a West Side Story fan.
Wow.
The original I do really love, but the remake I was, but I did watch that at home. So I do think that hinders the experience. But I'm not a Steven Spielberg girly. I don't know. I feel like high. But I also feel like as we get more modern, they get better, because like they're more aware. I'm very curious about like if we do get because they're doing Fiddler on the Roof, right?
Yes, which is not a winner necessarily, but
I'm curious about that.
Still. Yeah. Yes. Well, we have a question about that coming up.
Spicy.
Yes.
Spoiler.
I would say, for me, I would rank it below West Side Story, personally. Above Mutiny on the Bounty, and that remake is very bad. And also above Rebecca.
Remember Rebecca with Armie Hammer? Speaking of Netflix, I just totally forgot that film existed. I watched that. My husband is a big pauser, like if we watch a movie at home, which is why I try to never watch movies with him.
Okay.
But I paused Rebecca maybe 50 times, and I think it took me like 3 days to finish it. I was like, this is so offensive. Like,
yeah, that tracks.
Wow, I forgot. I blacked that out. Wow.
Yeah, I had to look at a list of all of them, and I'd also forgotten that, so I had to put it there. I haven't seen like the newer version of like Around the World in 80 Days or All the King's Men, but I've heard both are not good. So
I saw All the King's Men. That's not good.
Yeah, there you go.
Bad time at the movies.
Yes. Okay. Chels, our friend Chels, said, is 1917 or All Quiet the more forgotten runner-up? Not to pit these two girls against each other.
I honestly, I would say All Quiet, because I feel like we're always going to compare things to 1917, and that cinematography specifically.
Yeah, good point.
And I think like it's really like memorable, like whereas All Quiet, a lot of people watched it at home, but like 1917, like it had that conversation around it, like you have to see it in the theater. And I think those kind of movies will always be more well remembered.
That makes sense. For me, I feel like they're both in the same boat where like I never actually hear anyone talking about either one of them. So
I don't think we'll have like a good time. I think that we'll get another World War I film and we'll bring it up again, both of them now. But it's just like we were talking about, like it's impossible to talk about All Quiet without bringing up 1917. And it's just, if there's nothing to bring up with that, like World War I or like war movies, we're never going to talk about them.
That's true. Yeah, there you go. Sophia Savanello said, do you attribute All Quiet's bland tech category wins, 3-note score, that production design to voter laziness?
I do, 100%. Because I think
you said that earlier.
People see it in the lineup for Best Picture and they're like, well, that's the worthy winner. And I think that, like I said, a lot of people hated Elvis so much. Even though I think its production design is really fascinating, especially if you watch Catherine Martin and her team talk about it, like rebuilding Graceland and Vegas. And they did all of that at the height of the pandemic, which I think a lot of people forget because it came out so late. But Babylon is just absolutely insane. And I have been to like the Ace where the big party is at the beginning. And like they did all of that during the pandemic. And I think that production design is so crazy, especially there's a scene about production design with the studio when she goes to film. And I think that's just so fascinating. And like you were saying that like All Quiet was a little unexpected there, but I do think that if you don't know what to vote, and a lot of these people don't see all these movies, especially if they're not nominated for Best Picture, it's easy to name check, and it's also very easy to name check the one that starts with like an A, like All Quiet. Like
yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
I don't have to read the rest.
Whatever's at the top. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a lack of passion, maybe also for the other nominees in those categories. I would have voted for Babylon in both score and production design, but it is very clear to me that there was a level of apathy for that movie that
I think that
pervaded
when
else.
The criterion, I will never leave them about releases next year, that I will just force them to happen. I think there will be a resurgence of Babylon. I feel like people will reevaluate it, and
I hope
it'll be my new Jennifer's Body. Like 10 years later, people are like, this was the greatest movie of all time. What are you doing? It'll happen.
They just didn't understand it.
It was too
at
soon.
the time. Jamie said, in a world where this season is prolonged, similarly to the Power of the Dog year, do you see the runner-up surging from behind in the final weeks to take it from Everything Everywhere? Or was the sweep a sign that picture was always going their way? I think Everything Everywhere would have held strong. I don't think All Quiet could have taken it down, no matter how long it took.
Yeah, I think like if anything, All Quiet could have benefited from like later voting just to get more nominations, or like but I don't think it was ever gonna win. I just think the passion was too much, and like who's that passionate about All Quiet? Like
apparently the British painting that broad brush with the Brits love All Quiet. Yes. Ian Balaklock said, I love how this lineup satisfies both the casual moviegoer and hardcore cinephile. My question is, if you had to swap one or two of Everything Ever All at Once's wins, which categories would you choose?
Original screenplay for Tar.
Yeah.
And I would also do... No, I don't. You know what I would do? This is weird because it would give Everything Everywhere still a win. Jamie Lee Curtis or Stephanie Hsu.
Yeah. I mean,
I was low in that movie, and I still think about her performance. I think she's so great in it, and especially after Joyride, I just think she is like such a impressive actress, and I'm really excited to see where she goes from here. But I love Jamie Lee Curtis. Like Halloween was one of my first like I love movies moment. But an Oscar?
That happened. I know. Yeah, I would take it away from Jamie Lee Curtis as well, not to pile on, but I mean, come on. And I would give it to, personally, I would give it to Carrie Condon.
I loved her in that movie.
I loved her. Yeah. And I thought that would have been a
really good solo Banshees win.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say there. Yeah, I think she's the best in that lineup. I would have happily taken Angela Bassett as well, just so we could sort of have some closure there, similar to like a Glenn Close type of thing, where it's just like it's been so long and they haven't been rewarded, and like,
what are we doing?
Let's just yes, exactly. So anyway, that, or yeah, like you said, Stephanie Hsu, like honestly, any of those three would have been great.
I just need the Oscars to get in the realm of rewarding people when it's their best performance and not waiting until, you know, we've nominated this person 15 times. Should we do something?
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah. In an ideal world, that is the case. Yes. Okay, Joey Gentili said, Everything Everywhere is one of, if not the most overrated film in Academy history to win Best Picture, in my opinion. What do you think truly drew that film to sweep the way it did? Well, we sort of talked about that a little bit already, but do you have any additional thoughts on that?
I just think like emotionally, like we were talking about, people just connect with something. But I also think like it was kind of like you were saying that it's a really unexpected way to tell those like themes and express that type of experience for people. And I think that I'm really low on this movie, but I think it's a really exciting Best Picture winner because it's so unexpected, and it shows that it's not just always going to be like the default thing that makes the most sense with what we think of as Academy taste.
Right.
And I think it shows like all this change that they've made in the voters and like who they've invited. It's really made a huge difference. And I think that's really exciting. Like, this was not a movie I was like, at one bit, like I didn't jump off my couch or anything, but like, it's exciting to see the change. And like, I'm excited for what this means for what kind of movies get made and like get Oscar pushes. Cause I feel like this kind of opened that door of like, March isn't too early. Like, you can do it if you do it the right way. And like, just because a movie doesn't fit the narrative of what we always look at for Oscars, I think like it makes the race more exciting. And as someone who likes the race itself, like a sport, like I'm always excited for like a shakeup. Like, that's so exciting. It's not just the movies October through December that are focus features, or like, it's so many more movies now.
Yeah. And just think of how boring Oscar season would be if it was just the same type of movie winning, you know, that we could always predict ahead of time.
I would much rather not know all year what was winning versus like last year's 3 months of The Fabelmans going to win picture, director. Like, I like a spicy entry that's not unexpected.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can just speak for my own perspective, which is that it does combine style and substance. It has heart. There was that rooting factor for pretty much everyone in the principal cast, you know, and it feels like it's of a piece also with what blockbusters are doing with the multiverse, but doing so kind of like as a means of telling an emotional story rather than just like having it be the thing itself to be like, look how cool the multiverse is, you know?
I will say that is a really good point. And especially as someone who doesn't see Marvel movies, this was the only multiverse movie I saw.
Well, there you go.
So I got that storytelling done the right way.
Yeah. I don't know. I also think there just weren't really that many films in the Best Picture lineup that had that like direct emotional resonance in such a, you know, like a warm way. Like, people like to feel good when they're voting, you know, that sort of thing.
You walked away feeling like good, and I think that really works with people. Like, that's what people don't want to cry that much, I guess. I do, but
not in like a devastated way, but maybe like in an emotional catharsis way, like when Michelle Yeoh and Stephanie Hsu are hugging at the end, right?
Yes.
That's like, what a lovely moment, that sort of cry.
Yes.
Anyway, let's get to some of these other Best Picture nominees, the also-rans, I guess you could say. I think a fun way of doing this is to just kind of go in nomination order and talk about the ones that got the most and end with the ones that got the least. Why not? Starting with the Banshees of Inisherin, which got 9 nominations and 0 wins.
That is so crazy.
Yep. So, Martin McDonagh film, reuniting with his boys, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. Glad to see them both getting their first overdue Oscar nominations, and to have them be for a Martin McDonagh film, I think was pretty special, I imagine, for them. So, yeah, for those who don't know, it's about the breaking up part of a friendship when Gleason's character says he doesn't want to have anything to do with Farrell's character anymore. It's also a period piece, which sometimes people forget, set about a century ago in this fictional island of Inisherin. And it has these parallels with the Irish Civil War playing out in the background. What did you think of Banshees?
Funny enough, when I first saw it, because I had my best friend in high school and we were obsessed with In Bruges, and we would like make everybody watch it. Like it was a whole thing. So them all getting back together was really thrilling to me. And my dad's family is from Ireland, so like the Irish boys are a big part of my introduction to film. And I was like, that was nice, and I didn't really think about it again. But when I rewatched it, I was like, oh my god, like I loved it so much more. I think it's one of his best screenplays. It's so dark, but also so like heartwarming, and like I really love what it says about like lifelong friendships, but also just like expectations of other people and like what you perceive from relationships. And I just think that Colin Farrell has never been better, and I am a huge Colin Farrell person, and just like I loved him so much in this film. And I also love Barry in this film so much. He absolutely gutted me. And just I really was like rooting for this for cinematography, man. Like all season I was like,
beautiful,
it
right?
is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. It has no right to be so beautiful. And obviously Jenny the donkey, I'll carry her with me forever, you know.
Yeah, she'll always live on in our hearts.
Well, forever. But yeah, good time, depressing time, but also like heartwarming. I don't know. It's
a mix of emotions for sure.
It really is like, so I don't know, it really stays with you and like grows with you. And that's also something that most Martin McDonagh movies do.
True. Yeah.
Good time.
Yeah, I really loved this movie, and it was also just fun watching this with like a sold out crowd of mostly older theater goers, you know, laughing at the right times, reacting very openly, but also like from what I could tell, really being like absorbed in this as like this great character drama. I think one of the first things I thought about while coming out of the theater was that like this is like a future classic sort of thing, and that like the storytelling is similar to something like The Piano, where like you almost can't believe it wasn't already based on like a novel.
It
right?
really felt like pre-existing storytelling. Like, it's really crazy.
Yeah. And I think all the performances I think were so lived in and just very deeply felt, and I just really kind of responded to the themes at the center of it, which is like what happens when a friendship just goes sour, especially when it's your best friend. And that really kind of disquieting feeling of like when one friend wants to end it and that the other one really, really doesn't. Like we obviously have seen thousands of movies about like romantic relationships and the sort of difficulties that come with that. But this really, for me, got to something universal that isn't always seen in film. So I really appreciate it for that. And I love the tone of it, the atmosphere. And yeah, I was just really pleased to see it do as well as it did, even if it didn't actually get any wins at the Oscars. I still think it'll probably hold up as one of the better films of this lineup.
I think so too.
Yeah. We got a question here from Josh Nettleman, who said, was Banshees third in every single category in which it was nominated?
I feel like for the most part, actually, yes.
Yeah.
Like, it's really crazy. I just think like people loved it, but they were like so passionate about everything everywhere, or even like Tar, people were really passionate about.
Yeah.
And I just think that Banshees was just like, they're there. I don't know what it is about it. Like, but I do, it's really wild to be like that nominated and just be like, come up almost there in every category. But I do think so.
Yeah. I mean, just going through it, like Best Picture, it was a pretty consistent presence everywhere. Like it won the Golden Globe over everything everywhere. Not that there's overlap there, but you know, I feel like not a lot of people hated it. So it probably ranked high on the preferential ballot. Director, I could see McDonough maybe being behind Spielberg in second. You know, Farrell, I think absolutely was like number 3 behind Austin Butler. I guess Barry Keoghan and Brendan Gleeson were like second and third.
Yeah.
So there's that. Carrie Condon I could see in third behind Bassett, or second, I don't know. Original screenplay, though, was probably the runner-up, because McDonough won a lot of screenplay awards for that.
Yeah, and I feel like people called it like a screenplay movie a lot. So I feel like that was, that's probably the only place it was like second, other than supporting actor, but that was because it had 2.
Right. Original score, maybe a little lower for the score, maybe a little lower for film editing, but yeah, I don't think it was 5th in any category.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
that's a really good question, because that is depressing to be like 3rd in every category.
I know. But hey, you're in the conversation at least. So take that as a win.
It'll live on just the way Jenny will.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was just maybe too small, too melancholy, perhaps. For some. Let's talk Elvis.
I'm the right person.
Yeah, I'm so eager to get your thoughts on this. I know how important of a movie this was to you this award season. This got 8 nominations, I believe, and it won nothing, which is actually even more shocking when you think about like what it was predicted to win. So yeah, what were your thoughts on Elvis and the emergence of Austin Butler and all that good stuff?
It's really nice to have this opportunity. But
I'll let you filibuster here.
So my parents were really big Elvis fans. Like their first dance at their wedding in the 70s, like was to an Elvis song. We watched a lot of his movies growing up. But funny enough, as a kid, I read Elvis and Me, Priscilla's book, repeatedly at my grandma's house, because it has like the real photos in the middle, and I was obsessed. But I never really was familiar with his story or really anything about him as a person. But I'm a huge Baz Luhrmann fan. Like I saw Strictly Ballroom and it changed my life. Huge Gatsby defender. So I was really excited to just have like another like period piece from him that had like modernized aspects to it. But I am a Britney Spears girly, like that. I joined Pop Girl Twitter when I joined Twitter. And I had no idea like the parallels between his personal life with his manager controlling him and her struggles of fame and like it being used against her, and essentially him the same way, where you just have no idea that this famous person is just feeling like in a cage and just like unable to make any decisions for themselves. And obviously he's not around to like speak to any of this, but like I had never heard of the Colonel. And I also remember, I don't know if you remember this, after people saw it at Cannes, there was the whole rumor of like Tom Hanks is the lead and Austin Butler is supporting like the narrative. But I think it was a really interesting way to tell his story. And obviously he's a really complicated figure, which we'll see presumably in Priscilla. But I mean, it was really fascinating. Like I never knew any of that stuff. And I think that regardless of how you feel about him, like if all of that is really true, which per the credits, as you're seeing on the Every Second Elvis account right now, like, I mean, the man robbed him blind. Like it's horrible. And I just had no idea. And I think that really showed a light to it. And I think Baz Luhrmann, it was really funny at first. I was like, why is this Australian director telling this like very American icon story? But he matches like his aesthetic, and I think it really worked for the visual style of Elvis as a person or performer. But Austin Butler, I've never really seen him in anything other than the Lifetime Bling Ring movie. And then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I was very unfamiliar with him. I had no idea that he could act like that. It was really crazy to me. And I really liked the performance in a way where, like, he obviously sang, but they did a good job of like blending Elvis's real vocals. And I think that was really cool. But I just think like he seems really shy, like in real life, to do like a performance like that is really interesting. And I'm never a biopic performance girly, but I was like all in on this man. I'm just so tired of waiting till people are older to reward them, because it's like a career win versus a good performance win. But I think it was really interesting. I'm a huge celebrity culture person, so this movie really like nailed all those points for me. And just like it was a good time at the movies. Like Elvis summer was so fun. And yeah, and Elvis was my top artist other than Charlie XCX last year. And
wow.
good vibes. But you know, I'm really excited for like what happens with his career now. I'm kind of glad he didn't win now that it's all over, because the backlash would have been a little terrible. But yeah, good time, good looking guy also. Like what is a bit much.
Fair enough. Yeah, I enjoyed Elvis. I definitely grew up with my parents loving Elvis and having some of his CDs playing all the time. So I'm very intrigued to see what this would be. I was admittedly one of the skeptics of Austin Butler in this role at first, like before I saw it, but he definitely won me over. You can just see like the blood, sweat, and tears that he put into it, just like nailing his mannerisms and his voice. And for me, at least, without it sounding too gimmicky, you know, also the whole discourse around him being stuck in that Elvis voice on the press tour was just very stupid to me. I'm sorry, but
I agree.
I think generally the writing is very formulaic music biopic, but I actually think, Baz Luhrmann being at the helm, I know he's not for everybody, but I do think he was a really good fit for this material, given the sort of, you know, outsized nature of who Elvis was and who Elvis still is to people as this like larger than life icon. And I think the way that it's told, it's in a way that stylistically it keeps you entertained with all the wild transitions and the costumes and the production design. I think it's a great sort of interpretation of what makes him such a legend. And as a film, it's more in the vein of like Rocket Man in that respect, compared to, sorry to bring this up again, but Bohemian Rhapsody,
you know what's
which
funny?
like completely
I bring up Bohemian Rhapsody all the time, and I've actually still never seen it.
Oh my god. What a twist. Well,
but I do agree it's a lot like Rocket Man, like to me.
Yeah, which like compared to Bohemian Rhapsody, that like completely neuters Freddie Mercury basically in a way that is not fitting of his persona, you know? Whereas here, I think Baz and Elvis works really well. Like the whole Elvis Goes to Hollywood segment is so fun. I love that so much. A lot of the stuff in Vegas. It's just very compelling, especially in the sort of exploring the exploitation part of it. Definitely don't love Tom Hanks here. It's a real ham sandwich of a performance, but yeah, so I don't know.
But I would be upset if I didn't give Catherine Martin all the credit in the world for everything she did on this film. It is absolutely crazy. I know someone who just went to Graceland. They still have a lot of the Elvis movie stuff. And it's just like, you can see the real Elvis outfit like next to the movie outfit. And I think that is so wild. And just like the rebuilding of Vegas and even Beale Street and then also Graceland, it's really impressive like what she was able to bring to life exactly, but also modernize to match Baz's style. Is really, they're a great couple, great like filmmaking duo. Love.
And just couple in real life. Yeah. because I sometimes forget that. But anyway, yeah, really enjoyed Elvis. It's not one of my favorites of this lineup, but for what it is, it's a pretty good time. We didn't get any questions for it.
Of course we didn't.
I think just some general questions maybe, but towards the end about that and other films. But I'm so like baffled as to why it didn't win anything. Like,
it's
what
that
happened
Catherine
there?
Martin stat that she either wins both or nothing, and now it's like that she got 3 nominations for Elvis because she was a producer. That if she gets 3, she wins nothing. So, or if she's nominated
okay.
for 3, she gets nothing.
There you go. Well, we'll see what happens next time.
Maybe she'll get 4 somehow.
Wow. Her impact. Okay, let's move on to The Fabelmans, which gets 7 nominations. And to continue the theme here, didn't win anything. I'll just say, as we get semi-regularly at this point, this is another entry into films about the childhood of the director canon. We've had Roma, we have Belfast, we also had from 2022 as well, Armageddon Time. I would say even things like Lady Bird and Licorice Pizza are sort of in that general trend. But I know this sounds wild considering the other films that Spielberg has made, but I do think for me, this will be thought of as a defining film for him because of that personal connection. Maybe the public didn't quite show up for it necessarily, and it hasn't really had like a rediscovery phase yet. But in terms of people who just love and appreciate Spielberg, I think this is a big one for him, you know? So what were your thoughts?
I'm really not a fan of it, but I do agree with you that it's like, because I think like my husband really hates Steven Spielberg, and if I bring him up, he's like, he's like, I don't care about dinosaurs, and I'm like, that is not what he should be known for. But I do think this is a really like, and it's really like sweet to see someone like him that is so accomplished as such like a not visceral, but like a very physical kind of filmmaker do something so subtle and personal, and just like towards the end of his life, it's really like, I don't know, it's thrilling to see someone do something so personal like as he's older. Like, whereas I feel like with like Roma and Belfast, I'm like, you're not that, like, you don't need to be looking back like that just now. But it felt really like authentic still coming from Spielberg, which is kind of like a way I don't always feel with those movies that you mentioned. So yeah, like I did with Roma. I love Roma, but Belfast was not for me. But I really love Gabriel Labelle in this movie so much. Yes. And I was not that high on this movie, but I was like, that kid is a star. And it's also just like another one of those things. How does he get this many nominations? And I don't think he was ever really in consideration, which is kind of just depressing because the movie doesn't work if he's not very good. And it's a little upsetting that we're still at that point where we don't consider like young actors really part of it. But I will say the part that really worked for me is not the ending with the horizon, but David Lynch himself. Oh my God. The best time of the movie with that scene. So good, just so good. But I really like seeing Spielberg like so intimate, and it was really, especially like after West Side Story, which I just felt like not that interested in. It just felt too kind of cold for me from him, like, but this feels like really like warm, and like it's never like mean, like it's always like he's fondly looking back at memories even if they're painful, like he like holds them close to him just because it's like his own family. And it's really interesting, especially I was a huge fan of that Spielberg documentary that HBO did. And like hearing him talk about his upbringing and then seeing him, whether it's fictionalized or not, like it was really interesting to see like the way he shot it and explored it. But you know, men will do anything except go to therapy, including making a whole film about it.
Hey, if you have the resources, you know.
And it gave us the iconic Michelle Williams, I started therapy. So always,
ironically,
I always deserved a Best Picture nomination just for that.
There you go. Yeah, I also think one of the things that I connected to is another trend as of late, which is movies about the magic of movies. And for me, some of those movies don't always actually capture that very accurately, like in the case of Empire of Light, also released that year. But here, I think what Spielberg is able to do is to sort of show how filmmaking and movies were like this salvation for him as he was growing up in this kind of tough household and dealing with his mother and his parents' divorce and like finding this creative outlet to sort of process his emotions. And for me, it's almost uncomfortable to watch at times. Like you're watching someone else's like home movies in a way where like if you look closely at it, you can see some of the tensions and like these very revealing moments, and you're like, oh, this isn't my business. Like you're sort of eavesdropping.
I don't need to see.
Yeah. Like this is very private and raw for like this one family. I don't know if I should be seeing this, but yeah, I thought it was really good. I love, like you said, the cameo at the end is excellent, and I think the very last shot is earned. Michelle Williams, I get why people were mixed on her performance. I will just say what I often say, which is that not everyone in the world is a subtle person. There are people who have big, bold personalities that can be unpredictable, and I do think that she taps into that pretty well. And it was interesting to see that version of Michelle Williams that we don't often get to see compared to some of her, quieter work.
Yeah.
I don't know where you fell on that performance, but that's where I was.
I felt like I needed the medication that Lady Gaga is now advertising for migraines.
Oh no.
But that's the thing, is that I saw a lot of people attributing it to her acting, and I was like, it's the character. Like,
yeah.
What are we doing here? Like, what is this conversation?
Right. Yeah.
And especially I was very confused by it because, like you said, she's not normally like a big actor. Like, she can be like Fosse Verdon, but like it's like she's not always. So I'm like, you have to know this isn't her just like hamming it up. Like,
right.
It was
very intentional.
It was a very weird conversation, but I wouldn't have nominated her, but I love her. So I was like, who's losing here? No one.
Right. Right.
She was never gonna win. So I was like,
did you have any thoughts on the lead supporting conversation with her? Because that was a big thread.
What was weird to me was how long that conversation went on, because I was like, this happens with literally every movie where you could get away with it. And some where you can't even get away with it. I do think she was supporting, but maybe they just were right that supporting was too crowded, which is funny because at the end I felt like it was not.
Nope.
I just think it was a bad campaign decision. And I think she could have easily just won in supporting still. Like, I still think that.
Yep.
But
I will just note something on that. I think it's interesting that we didn't see a lot of critics and other groups nominating her in supporting when they very easily could have. It's not like just because they decided we are going to campaign Michelle Williams in lead, that means every single group has to vote for Michelle Williams in lead. Because like we've seen Kate Winslet with The Reader, we've seen like Keisha Castle Hughes doing her switch. Like, it's possible to be in a different category. Lakeith Stanfield, whatever happened there, like, I'm just saying, I think it's just funny how like all of these groups fell in line and were like, okay, Michelle Williams is the lead, when like you can make your own choices. I don't know.
I completely agree. And I don't get it. Never will.
Yeah.
Never will. Bad decision.
She probably would have won in supporting, and she probably would have swept. I don't know. Seems like one of those easy, like almost like Viola Davis in Fences kind of thing, where like, yes, they have a lot of screen time, but they are still kind of supporting at the same time, and it's like definitely a borderline case, but like the amount of stuff that she gets to do probably would have overwhelmed the rest of the competition, and she could have just swept easily in supporting.
Very easily.
Whatever. I also think it was weird when she said that she felt like she was a lead, even though she hadn't seen the movie. Like, that was the whole comment that she had made about it.
It felt like
it was strange.
It felt PR-y, and I was not interested.
Interesting stuff, but happy to see Judd Hirsch nominated. That was a fun surprise. I'll say that. That was
something when people make those early predictions and all those people were talking about him and they were like, there's no way, he only has like 2 scenes. I was like, he's 1000% getting nominated. I just rewatched I rewatched Uncut Gems, and he's such a good time there too.
Yeah.
Good.
He's such a clutch player.
Yeah,
I love
so
him.
good.
Yeah. And good for him for breaking a Oscar record there for like 42 years or something between nominations.
Crazy.
From Ordinary People to now. That's wild. Anyway, let's talk Tar. Talking Tar. So 6 nominations for Tar.
Beautiful.
You can fill in the blank of what I would say next. Didn't win anything. This one I was really looking forward to beforehand, and thankfully for me it did not disappoint. I loved both of Todd Field's other films, In the Bedroom and Little Children, and I think I made a note of this in my little capsule review on Letterboxd, but I was very curious like what Todd Field, like what his perspective would be like all these years later, because he's such, for me, like a great observer of like human behavior in like also like in the contemporary era. Like he's not a period piece kind of person, and I think he created something very special and very memorable here, and presenting like a kind of biopic that's not actually a biopic, of course, but it feels so real that there are moments when you forget that Lydia Tarr is not in fact real.
That was like one of my favorite times online, where like all the jokes about her being real and like the fake profiles. Like I was like, this is so good. Like this is world building. When you're like talking to me about world building, like this is it. This is the big leagues.
And like, what did she win her EGOT for?
That was so fun. It would have been funny if Maestro came out before and she could have won her Oscar for the score on Maestro. That would have been a good time.
Yeah, I love it.
I loved Tar so much. It's really like a once in a lifetime kind of movie because of what you were talking about, the way he looks at human behavior and just like society, and because he took such a long break, and it just like I feel like you can feel it in every ounce of this movie. And this is another movie, very long runtime, but there's not a second I would trim out. I just think it's every moment is so well utilized, and obviously just Cate Blanchett gives one of the best performances. I mean, I don't even know of how long. She made everybody, like her and Todd Field together, made everybody believe that Lydia was real. And
that's magic. I know.
It's so incredible what they pulled off. And just like from the opening, that interview at the beginning, it's so he does such a good job of like explaining who she is and like what her accomplishments are with that, but it doesn't feel like he's like laying out like all the cards. Like he does it in such a natural way. And just like I know Sophia would love this, but the costume design, like her every outfit she wears is so incredible. And it just, I don't know, like even the production design, like this whole movie just I feel like I know who she is, and you can tell just how much time was spent developing every aspect of this movie. And I was really lucky I saw this movie at a Q&A with Cate Blanchett.
Oh, wow.
I left work early to go, and I got caught, obviously, because I posted about it. But I got to, like, she asked us a question and nobody raised their hand, but I did, because I was so, like, I just assumed everybody would raise their hand and I was the only one. And it was, like, about the ending of the movie and, like, what it meant. And it just, like, I don't know, it was so crazy. That movie just will stay with me forever. The ending is so perfect, and the editing, like it getting an editing nomination and cinematography, like just two of the greatest nominations to ever happen. And I also
very inspired.
Has like horror undertones. I was living. It felt like it's so weird that you bring up that he doesn't make like period pieces, because it really felt like a 70s film, but like it was modern. Like I loved it so much, and I'm happy he got the original screenplay and director nomination, but I would have loved for him to pull a win off in either. You saying this has 0 Oscar wins will just keep me up at night.
I know. The specificity of the screenplay for me it's just so on point. Like, I do not know very much about classical music, let alone like the sort of politics of it, but I love how much it rides the line between like presenting all of this in a pretty straightforward way and not treating the audience like idiots by doing too much like indicating of how you should be feeling about Lydia Tarr and about other characters that are in her orbit. But it's like, in the course of doing that, also you also see how someone who is problematic at best, abusive at worst, can get away with it because of the power that they wield over people. And it's complicated and it's thorny, and it is like those 70s movies that deal in these very complicated power dynamics. Like, even when it's plain as day to us that she's a bad person, like, you can still see how others around her have to navigate the situation in the right way because of her power and her ego. So it's very well observed, I think, in that respect. But also in Kate's performance, I think it's so mannered, but in exactly the right way. I know mannered is usually like a pejorative type of thing, but Lydia Tarr is like so full of shit and like has such an overinflated ego. And I think Kate is able to really thread the needle of being like that pretentious person while also showing in these tiny little moments and these facial gestures that she is sort of silently screaming inside as like her grip is starting to loosen on her position, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Oh, I love this performance so much.
And there's like, there's so much you can talk about with it. Like, you could do its own 30 to 40 minute segment like we did with All Quiet. But
and just shout out to Nina Haas, who I was sad that didn't come to fruition, because a great performance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And
Mark Strong's wig.
Well, yeah, Mark Strong's wig, Best Supporting Actor.
What could have been.
So, yeah. But like with Kate, like everything, like she has to learn with conducting and speaking German in multiple scenes. Like, it's this crazy, like, high wire act of a performance. I don't know. Very excited to talk about that down the line with the Best Actress series. So I don't want to say too much, but yeah, easily one of the best films of the year. And I'm glad it was recognized in such a big way beyond her performance, because that's something that I thought might be the case, like early on, that like, oh, this is just going to be a Best Actress and nothing else kind of thing. But
it's kind of like a really good bookend to Everything Everywhere, where it shows like another kind of movie that could seem to not for the Academy, but like it ended up being.
Right.
It's also like really exciting to see those kind of movies next to each other in the lineup. Like, like it's just really good year for film. Good year. Yeah.
And Kate and Michelle at a Best Actress race for the ages.
Literally will go down in history as like one of the coolest like top 2 contenders. Like, that is,
whoever wins, we win.
Yeah, that was a true like, wow, so good.
We got a few questions for this. Once again, Sophia Simonello says, recast Lydia Tarr with a Best Actress winner from each decade that you've covered so far on your Best Actress series. Love this question. I wrote down my list because I didn't want to dilly-dally too much on this, but I'll just present to you my list and you can let me know what you think on these.
Okay.
So, for the 30s, Katharine Hepburn.
Yes, for sure.
Like, no question.
Yeah, no question.
For the 40s, this is going to be a little bit of a stretch, but I could see her doing it and performing well, especially with different languages. Ingrid Bergman.
Okay, I see it.
I know she has a slightly warmer presence, but some of her later work, like in Autumn Sonata, she can do a cold, kind of thing. So I could see it.
And I would love her delivery of Petra's father. I would love that moment.
Oh, goodness. That would be incredible. Yes. For the 50s, that's a little tough. I think I'm tempted to say Vivian Leigh, but I think she's a little too vulnerable for that. I went with Susan Hayward here, who is she's very good at playing someone losing her grip. So I'll say that. For the 60s, I went with Anne Bancroft.
Ooh, I like that.
She's very versatile. I could see it. And the 70s, I know Sophia is going to want me to say Faye Dunaway, and I think she would be great. But I would also say Glenda Jackson would be incredible as Lydia Tarr.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And kind of scary, too.
Very scary. Like, very scary. Her Petra's father would be terrifying.
Jesus Christ.
And when
I can't even imagine.
The Mark Strong incident would be wild.
Yeah. Yeah. But also Faye Dunaway would be really fun.
Faye Dunaway would just be incredible. And Sophia's closet would be full of duplicate looks.
I'm sure. Did you have any other, it doesn't have to be like specifically winners, but any other older stars you think could do it?
I was actually thinking about Ellen Bernstein. I think she'd be really interesting.
That would be fun.
Yeah. And I would just like to see it. So she could just do an aged Lydia Tarr.
Yeah. I think the implication here is like whatever age they would be in the right, demographic for her. Yeah.
Faye Dunaway would just be so good. That's a great one.
What about like Jane Fonda? I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking about is her on the Newsroom. She like absolutely loses her cool when that show goes off the hinges, and I could see it.
Yeah. Okay. Next question from Corey Zimmerman, who said Banshees, Elvis, Fabelmans, and Tar combined for 30 noms and 0 wins. Unprecedented in the expanded era where a Best Picture nomination seems to boost the odds for at least one win. See 2012, 2014, 2018, 2019, where 8 Best Picture nominees got wins. Why no similar spread the wealth approach from voters this year?
I think people were just so passionate about Everything Everywhere that they gave it almost everything they could. And then I think outside of that, it was just All Quiet won the text. And then I do think like there was that passion vote that seeped through for Top Gun and sound, which sounds so weird. But I just think that like otherwise people like weren't really like, they didn't spread any wealth. They just went all in on the thing they were passionate about.
Yeah.
Which is
definitely.
And I think like we were talking about, I think like Banshees was like number 3 in a lot of categories. And then I think everywhere else pretty much All Quiet was number 2.
Yeah.
And like I feel like there wasn't really anywhere for anyone else to win. Like, because All Quiet won international features. So there goes that like could it have been something else, even though it should have been EO. But
oh my god, I totally agree, actually. Wow.
I love
a fellow EO stan.
We're not very popular, but we love EO.
Speaking of great donkeys. Yeah.
Yes. The year of the donkey.
It was. It really was. I mean, I wasn't expecting wins for like the Fabelmans or Tar, to be honest.
Yeah,
outside of potential for Kate. But,
yeah, that was it.
Yeah, so those weren't as shocking. I think the lesson that I learned last year with The Power of the Dog is that just because a film gets a bunch of nominations does not mean that it can translate that passion into wins.
R.I.P. The Irishman.
Well, yeah, that's a great example of that. Yeah. I think that was the case with like all of those, where I think most of these films that got shut out were not the kinds of films that a widespread academy that has very different tastes and ages could just agree on and feel motivated enough to vote for, when you also have Everything Everywhere and all of the texts of All Quiet really just being in your face,
Yeah.
So let's move on to Top Gun Maverick, which gets 6 nominations, and it does get a win. It wins for Best Sound. So in many ways, Top Gun Maverick, the movie event of the year, I do just think based on impact and sort of combining like creativity and originality with blockbuster style filmmaking that everything everywhere was the movie of the year and obviously winning Best Picture. But I think like for the casual movie going audience, Top Gun Maverick was an event. You know, they filmed it in 2019 and they held it through the height of the pandemic and finally released it last year once some of the restrictions were loosened, and clearly paid off in a major way. I will admit I had never seen the original Top Gun until this one was coming out. I don't know about you, but
you didn't miss much.
Yeah, I did eventually watch it just ahead of this one, and I felt like I kind of missed out on the kind of like nostalgia of that when I did watch it. Like, I thought it was fun, clearly dated, you know, but I could understand the appeal of it in like a kitschy sort of way. I thought this is an improvement over the original, personally. Feels like one of those, another trend, legacy sequels that we've been getting in recent years in terms of like delivering on a similar experience of the original and kind of building off of it. And for the most part here, I think delivering a pretty satisfying experience for the audience. I believe you are not a Top Gun Maverick person, though, so I'm curious your thoughts.
So I do want to preface this, that growing up, my little brother was obsessed with the original Top Gun. This is when you had like TVs in your cars, like, you know, because like we would watch the VHS anywhere we went. Like Hall & Oates was the themes, like that was all we ever listened to. But I was not really like I didn't care when it was announced they were making a sequel. Like I was not very excited. I did end up seeing it in theaters. Like I didn't see it for a while because I was like, this isn't something I really care about. I was very excited for John Hamm. I was all about that.
Of course.
Him not being a movie star eats away at me. So I was like, let's go support.
So strange. What happened there?
What happened? But I thought it was fine. Like I didn't think, like especially like once the summer ended, I recognized that it was like this huge blockbuster event. And like you said, like it really did get like the casual moviegoer back to theaters, which I think is obviously so important. I did like the way that the flight sequences were filmed, but outside of that, I really thought it was just like basic action move. Like it didn't stand out to me. But I do think it's funny to bring up John Hamm, but I was like, kind of like, that's what the money is for. Like when the Oscar started, like I was like, what?
Great point.
Like I do recognize the text, and I think it was absolutely deserved to be nominated in like the technical categories. But like when we were like talking about director, I was like, are we serious? Like, and especially given all the rumors,
Tom Cruise, an actor.
Yeah, I was like, what are we doing here? When that showed up in adapted screenplay, the scream that I let out was like, yes, we got that instead of The Whale, and sure, that's not what took its spot, but like, I was relieved. But I didn't see that coming after it was like yanked from WGA for the whole like.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Fine movie. I never thought about it ever again after I saw it. With the exception of like there was like a lot of John Hamm fanfic all over Tumblr, and I was like, that's fine. That's okay. But yeah, it's fine. I adapted screenplay. Are we serious? And I really loved Scream Queens, so I was very excited for the rise of Glenn Powell. I was good outcome there. But that's all I got on that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Oh, and Stephanie, Lady Gaga. Not a good song.
Of course.
But another nomination. That's okay.
Yep.
And I loved her performance at the telecast. Yeah. I really loved it.
Good interpretation, I think, at least.
Yeah.
I liked it, even if these kinds of movies aren't always my thing. This is something I'll also talk about with Avatar, though, later. But I did just want to note how, for me, the success of both of these films isn't just that they're big blockbusters with spectacle that sort of demand to be seen in theaters. Yes, that's true. But also, I think they are both willing to just sort of slow down and let the audience experience all of the elements in a way, like having those aerial sequences and those like fun hangout moments just like
volleyball?
Shirtless volleyball scenes, you know, like rather than be like these Marvel films or DC that are just so focused on driving the plot forward at every moment. And they start to lose that sense of wonder and magic, I think, that you ideally would want in a blockbuster.
Like,
and they begin to feel like homework, you know? So
the magical moment of Jennifer Connelly on the back of a motorcycle with the Lady Gaga song in the background. If we're making a big blockbuster, I want a moment like that, not like here's a post-credit scene connecting this to 9 movies and 13 television shows. Like, that's what I want from a blockbuster.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good point.
Yes. So that's what I think Hollywood should be hopefully learning a lesson from, you know, the success of these kinds of movies that aren't relying on every single scene has to be about moving the plot forward. It's just, it gets exhausting at a certain point. But anyway, I do think Maverick did deliver on that, even while admitting that the script is not my favorite, and at least dialogue-wise is kind of rough at times, but I enjoyed it for what it was, even if it didn't quite, sort of like you, it didn't really have a super lasting impact on me. It was just like, isn't this nice to all be hanging out in the theater and like reacting in all the right places and just like, we're having a good time, that sort of thing. Yes. Yeah, again, the Best Actor campaign for Tom Cruise was a little much, but, you know, I get it. I understand. He did get a nomination for producing, so
he's fine.
That's what the achievement should have been for anyway. Exactly. For him, you know, the decision to hold it to 2022 and get all that money, you know.
Exactly.
Anyway, question from Ronnie Castle. If Top Gun Maverick was released before COVID, would it still be nominated for Best Picture?
No.
I don't know if it would have been ready before COVID, but if we're talking during COVID, no.
No, it's exactly like the money propelled it to the conversation. Yeah. And then I think that people, the Academy bait type people in the voting body had not seen it yet and then saw it. And I think that that's where, but I think like maybe it would have been in consideration for text, but not Best Picture before or during COVID.
Right.
So bravo, Tom Cruise, for holding on. You added another Oscar nom to your profile.
Yes, another Oscar loss. Let's go to Avatar: The Way of Water. So 4 nominations for Avatar: The Way of Water. It wins visual effects. Not a surprise there. We all could have seen that coming a year in advance. At least that's one thing we could predict. So finally having this release of the Avatar sequel, which, just like the first one, massive box office success. If it weren't for Top Gun Maverick, it would have been by far the highest grossing movie of the year. So I'll say I generally liked the original Avatar. Obviously, the visuals are spectacular and all the technical stuff is just off the charts, like a lot of people have said. But also, as a lot of people have said, the story is just so copy-paste redundant for me, and the characters are very standard, 2-dimensional. So I went into the sequel with reserved expectations and just curious to see where I would land, because I felt like I wasn't one of these people who was like judgmental of like Avatar as a property and just being like, okay, James Cameron, you have to impress me, like that sort of thing. I was just like willing to go with it, and I generally enjoyed myself, and I think I found myself more invested in the characters more so than the first one by a long shot. And I found that the third act of the film was where this was like James Cameron just like at the peak of his powers, like blockbuster filmmaking excellence kind of thing. And so, yeah, it was another thing where I felt like it was a great theatrical experience. What did you think?
I actually had never seen Avatar. So it came out right around when Jennifer's Body came out, and I was the senior in high school, and I thought I was so edgy for not seeing Avatar, and repeatedly saw Jennifer's Body in theater and would not shut up about it. Like, I was so cool. But
You're so counterculture.
That's exactly what I thought, and what a little shit. But I waited until they re-released it right before Avatar. I think it was like August or September. because everyone was like, don't watch it at home at this point. Like, just, they're going to put it in theaters. And I was really blown away. I was a huge Fern Gully fan. I don't know if you remember.
Well, sure.
So I was obsessed with that movie, and I was like, everyone's like saying this is Pocahontas, but this is just Fern Gully, literally.
Yeah.
But I think it's really cool to see like someone like James Cameron tell a story like that on like such a large scale. Like, we don't get blockbusters about like the environment like that. That's really crazy. But I was really impressed. And then when I saw the second one, seeing Titanic but in Avatar is really wild. Like, I was like, what is
that's what that third act is.
I was like, this is crazy. Obviously the visual effects are just beautiful, but I was really impressed with like the writing improvements, and I really like the way he constructs like, obviously there's dialogue issues, but his storytelling and the way he constructed that entire film is really interesting to me. And I think that even what's his name, Sam Worthington, he was way better in this version or in this installment. But like you said, like the characters I felt more connected to and invested in. It was good. I was really like impressed with it. And I think, like you said, that's what you want from a blockbuster movie. Like the whales, or what are they called? They're not called whales in Avatar, but I didn't expect to cry about whales in like a $200 million movie. Good sob there. Yeah, it was good. I think like it got exactly the nominations it deserved. I could see an argument for him in director, but I just think that year was very stacked with directors, and he was already nominated for director for the first Avatar. But and also I'll just say, like, spend as much time as you need, because I'll go see the next one like whenever. Who cares? Like, and everyone needs to stop yelling at James Cameron. Like, you're all gonna go see his movies. Like, stop being so weird about him. I don't get it, but good time. I don't think I'll think about it again until the next one comes out, but
and we'll rewatch the first two this time. Hopefully both in theaters. The visual effects are just like
the water
off the charts. So lifelike that you almost can't even believe your eyes in certain shots.
With the first scene when she jumps in, I was like, I don't need to see any other visual effects contenders ever. Crazy.
And like I was sort of alluding to before, like he just knows how to make like that 4-quadrant hit for an audience, and showing the importance of things feeling tactile and versatile, even though so much of this is CGI. Like, even the lighting on some of the nighttime scenes is like very well thought out compared to like the muddiness of most CGI blockbusters that come out these days.
Like, that's a really great point, is that like at night it was like a whole nother world, whereas I feel like at night in a lot of like CGI heavy films, it's like so flat and you can't see anything. And that's a really great point, the lighting. What a film.
So I definitely walked away from this feeling positive and very appreciative that we have an artist like James Cameron still making films on this scale, again, compared to what else is out there in the landscape, even while still having those same, story issues at times that still haven't really fully been fixed. And like, again, maybe he should be redistributing the responsibility to someone else to write the screenplay next time. I don't know, but anyway, good time. Let's go to Triangle of Sadness, which gets 3 nominations and 3 big ones: picture, director, and original screenplay. So this was part of, I feel like this whole episode is about trends in modern films, but like continuing a trend in recent years of like eat the rich kinds of narratives. I think there's kind of a hunger for that, pun intended, I guess, for these like social satires that usually are targeting like rich white people for the most part, but not always, who are like of a certain standing, and how their money and their privilege tends to just ruin everything they touch, essentially. And that's what Triangle of Sadness is getting at. I have to say, for as much as people really loved Triangle of Sadness initially, and it was a Palme d'Or winner, I was ultimately surprised that it made the Best Picture lineup. I don't know about you, but like, if only because it wasn't really like, how much of a splash was it really making in the precursors? Not a whole lot, but I think it is a solid film, but also so unsubtle in its approach and its messaging that after a while I got pretty tired of it, if I'm being honest.
It's so heavy-handed that like it's just it really like becomes, I don't want to say unwatchable, but it's just like I get it. Like I don't know. Dolly De Leon, innocent, obviously. It's weird because there are sequences I really love, but like I would never ever rewatch it. Like I like one and done. I do really like the Woody Harrelson like communist sequence. Like I think that's really funny, and it's honestly probably funny on its own, but I just feel like there's two movies, like while they're on the boat and then after the boat, and I don't care about anything after the boat. Like I do not care. I don't know. It's
kind of three movies with the first part of it too.
It's just
with Harris Dickinson and all that stuff. Yeah.
I actually really love that sequence because it like reminds me of a lot of people that I know. But it's also just weird because I don't think even last year it was the best example of Eat the Rich movies. Like it's, I don't know. And he is a very aggressive person, and I just not like
Ruben Östlund.
Yes, and shout out to Allison Williams for correctly pronouncing his name during all of the announcement nominations. Good.
Ruben Östlund. Yes,
she was great. But yeah, best picture, best director, original screenplay is like the one that I was like, oh, they think this is edgy and they don't get that it's making fun of like primarily a lot of Academy members, but like picture, director, like, and I also was really shocked just because it's very in your face but like graphic, and I was like, are they really like, it just felt not in their alley. And I also just will never get over Ruben's because I think it's really funny, his reaction video to him not getting a nomination, and I was like, when they like hold that, like, I don't know, it just felt, I felt victim to festival hype. I saw it at Beyond Fest, and like they gave us t-shirts and the vomit bags and all this stuff, and I like went home and I was like, oh, that movie was so funny and whatever. And then I like woke up the next day and I felt like hungover. Like I was like, I don't think this was that good. Like it's very heavy-handed, and there's better films about this topic. Very unnecessary.
So it's like you were on that yacht with everyone and you're having a good time, and then you woke up and you're like, oh.
It's literally that when you watch it. It's not for me.
My scorching hot take on the segments of the film is that my favorite part was the last third.
Okay, I do like the ending third.
Mostly because of Dolly D.
Yeah, because of her. I just don't like the way the way he writes everything with, I don't know any of these characters' names, but Harris Dickinson.
That's fine.
And Charlie. Like, I just, I wasn't a fan of the way that he wrote it. But Dolly's performance, especially in the last third, because it's like her time. But I love that. And I was sad they couldn't figure Dolly's campaign out until it was too late.
I mean, imagine that she was sixth compared to, if we look at all the nominations it did get.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just think the third act was the most unpredictable to me, and also I'm a fan of shows like Survivor and Lost, so like the whole thing of them having to like rebuild a society on an island is just like something that interests me for some reason, more than like rich people being assholes on a boat. So
that's true.
I see what people see in it, and it does have its fans. Just wasn't really for me, and it wasn't for you either, and that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. Speaking to people who did respond to it, Joey Gentili said, Triangle of Sadness is my favorite of the year, but All Quiet on the Western Front is clearly the best in this group and should have won. Do you have a favorite here, but think something else should have won, showing you don't have a bias?
My favorite is Tar, but I think Women Talking should have won.
Okay.
What about you?
Okay. My favorite and what I think is the best are the same.
Everything Everywhere?
In this particular case, yes. For me. So, that's that.
That's that. That's the tea.
But also, I could also easily just do a split of like Everything Everywhere and Tar being the best, because I think that's maybe the most technically accomplished film between the two and is the most like, it has less flaws than Everything Everywhere. So I could see me saying like Tar is the best, but either way, those are the top two for me.
Good set.
Juan Carlos Ojano said, how close was Dolly De Leon to a supporting actress nomination? And do you think Triangle of Sadness maxed out on nominations or not quite?
I think she was sixth, and I also think there's a world if they had campaigned him that Woody Harrelson could have finessed his way in, given the nominations it got.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised it didn't happen in a way.
I really am too. I'm also
they seem to like him.
Not like it would have been really on point for the Academy if he got nominated, but Dolly didn't. Like it seems like something they would have done.
Sounds right. That's like a Danny Aiello getting in for Do the Right Thing, and then no other black characters. So anyway, another one from Joey Gentili. In a lineup of 5, does director line up with picture?
No, because
So in other words, yeah.
I think All Quiet still gets in.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I might argue that Top Gun Maverick could get in too.
I was thinking it was either, honestly, based on what it won, like if Tar would fall out for Top Gun.
Ugh.
I know. I hated it. I hated the thought.
I don't know. I think my lineup of what I think would be picture if it was just 5 would be Everything Everywhere, Banshees, All Quiet, Tar, and Top Gun Maverick.
Oh no, Fabelmans.
Yeah,
that makes
I could see that being like a shocking snub on the night.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, I could see it. And that would be a fun, interesting lineup of its own. So, yeah. One more about Triangle of Sadness from Kareem Balak. How did Ruben Östlund manage to get into Best Director?
Good question. When the investigation starts, let me know.
This is a case for the FBI. It's that international auteur slot, right?
Yeah.
That seems to be a new thing.
Which is just the wrong one this year.
Greg Adams said, of the 5 that got blanked, Banshees, Elvis, Fabelmans, Tar, Triangle, which do you think came the closest to winning something, and in what category?
Elvis and costume design?
That was going to be my answer. So we are linked on that one.
Yeah, because I don't know what number 2 would be if it wasn't Elvis.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe Best Actress was super close, and
Kate
could have been.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I can't really see any other.
Yeah, I feel like it's either of those.
All right. Well, let's get to our final Best Picture nominee, Women Talking. So, beyond Best Picture, it only gets Best Adapted Screenplay for Sarah Polley, and that is its win. So it is technically 1 for 2. The only thing it didn't win is Best Picture. So how about that? Yeah, this is another one that I very highly anticipated going into it. And often when I have a film that I'm wanting to see a year in advance, that's also based on a novel, I will 9 times out of 10 read that novel ahead of the movie. And like I've already done like this past year with Killers of the Flower Moon, for example. So I read Women Talking, loved it, found it really moving and very well balanced too. Like, because you might expect it to be a little formal and not as exciting because it's so focused on just like women convening in a barn and talking. But it's really, really well written and surprisingly funny. And then you get these like unexpected subtle moments that really hit you. And I think for the most part, Sarah Polley really succeeded in conveying that. what were your thoughts on women talking? I know you loved the film, but can you explain more of what you responded to in the film?
I think that, like you said, sometimes I really, like, I love a dialogue heavy film, but it was like, the book is really, like, it does such a great job of, I feel like I know what their day-to-day life is, even though I'm only really in this one location with them. And I was kind of like, how do they really bring that to the screen? But it just is like, first off, the score is just one of the best I've heard in so long. It is just this sweeping, it's so good. But the performances, along with, I really do think that Sarah Polley's direction is just really beautiful. Like, it's so subtle, it like guides you along each woman's journey, but the performances are really what just like really pushes this movie over the edge. And I really mean, like, it is such an ensemble, like not one of them is better than the other. And I think that aside from Rooney Mara, who I loved seeing in such a subtle maternal, like, it was so pure of her, but even Ben Whishaw is so incredible in this movie. And there was the panic attack of what if he gets in and none of the women do, because we couldn't agree if Claire Foy or Jessie Buckley were in line. But I think this movie does such a exceptional job of telling women's stories without being like ultra feminist point of view, or like, it's never like aggressive in what it's trying to say. It's just having the conversation. And I also think it's a really great piece about faith, and like, it's never looking down on anyone who puts their faith first, or people who don't understand it. Like, I like Jessie Buckley's character, I think it does such a great job of never, like, she puts her religion ahead of everything else, and then her husband, and then her children, and then herself. But I think it's never like looking down on her, which I think is really important. And it's open to having these discussions that are so hard to have for people, and including like the audience. Like, some people don't want to discuss these heavy things or go into it in a non-judgmental way. But I think this movie is just so, it cares about every woman's perspective, and it's never an argument, it's just a discussion. And I think we never really get that. And I also think like, it just flies by. Like, it's not a long movie. It is so easy to watch. And it has like the reveal of the time period, you could say, even though he's using a ballpoint pen. But like, I think like it does a really great job. And that's a movie that I took my husband to see it, and I didn't expect him to like it, and he really loved it. And then I took my parents to see it, and they still talk about it. When I took them to Barbie, my dad literally was like, remember when we saw women talking here? What a movie. And I was like, what? It's not the movie that I
what a picture.
That's my dad. But it's not the movie that I thought I would show to people that they would walk away with that from. Like, I want people to have that reaction, but I didn't know people would have that reaction, like, outside of movie friends. But it's like a really meaningful, impactful movie, and I think she nails every inch of it. And I feel really blessed that one day I'll get to share that movie with my daughter when she's old enough and hopefully likes movies. But great movie. So happy that was the W movie that got in.
That was a nail biter for sure.
I was on the edge of my seat.
Yeah. I think, Sarah Polley is such a smart and instinctual director, and she's able to, I think, really capture like how even in this very ordinary setting and without much, if any, action, you can still make a very compelling story, because what's going on underneath all of it is so personal and raw. And you're seeing, like you kind of said, like this multi-dimensional view of how these women should proceed, with the knowledge that they have to do something, that they have to take action to prevent this further violence. And it feels also like kind of a biblical story, even while being set in a present day. Like you were saying, I know some people have been surprised to learn that it's not like a super big period piece. But yeah, I just think it speaks to how, unfortunately, these situations are timeless, and how it could really take place at any time. That's what really got to me, is that to just, see how these women are processing their traumas and come to these conclusions on their own without even having the benefit of knowing how to read or write, but also like seeing how they support each other even through those arguments they have. Yeah, it's one of these films where I think having women behind the camera was also really necessary in telling this story the right way. Like if this was told even like 1 or 2 decades ago, I could easily see like a lot more men being involved behind the camera doing that. But here it's just, I don't know. The ensemble's great. I especially liked the elders in the group, like Judith Ivey and Sheila McCarthy are so perfectly cast. And I know it was a rocky road heading into the Oscar nominations for this movie, but I'm very glad that it eked out this Best Picture nomination and the writing win. I think that's about as good of an outcome as we could get based on how things were trending before the nominations. So,
it's not the end goal I foresaw, but I was pleased that it pulled it off at the end, because it was not a good time.
Exactly. We got quite a few questions for this. Jeffrey Kerr said, Women Talking only received 2 nominations overall. Did it deserve more? If so, which categories?
I personally think it deserved both Claire Foy and Jessie Buckley, Ben Whishaw, and I would also nominate Rooney Mara. I thought it's one of my favorite performances from her. You never get to see her. I mean, like, she's been subtle before, but I've never really seen her be like earnest like this in a way. And I really loved her.
Like you said, pure.
Yeah, it was so pure. And like, I don't know if it's because I am a mother, but the way that she talks about, like delivers the lines about her child, and that she's always going to love it, that she doesn't care where she got the child from. I just thought like there was such a like real love in her eyes. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't think of when they think of Rooney Mara. They think of like brooding girl with the dragon tattoo or eating pie, Rooney Mara. And I also would have done Best Director and Original Score just because, and Costume Design, because I did not realize all the layers to the way she dressed each woman, and I thought it was really interesting.
For me, it sounds very bad. I don't think it would give it any individual acting nominations, just because like there's so many great performances.
They're all
that
great.
even missed out, like even like beyond this film though, like just the general 2022, there were so many greats that none of them, I don't know if they quite hit my 5, but like easily the ensemble of the year at the same time. Original score for sure. I do not understand for the life of me how that missed, especially with Hildur being a previous winner very recently. Genuinely, like, what happened there? I don't understand. And I think I agree, like, costume design would be a great nomination for it and somewhat unconventional. So yeah, it definitely deserved more, but I'm glad it at least got one high profile win.
Great speech also.
Yes, really good speech for sure. And also a great look.
Look.
I love. Yeah. Andrew Carden has a big question for us, which is, where do you rank Women Talking among the 19 Best Picture nominees directed by women?
Okay, I have to look.
Well, Andrew has provided a list, thankfully.
Beautiful.
I'll just list them off for you, and this is in chronological order. We have Children of a Lesser God, Awakenings, The Prince of Tides, The Piano, Lost in Translation, Little Miss Sunshine, The Hurt Locker, An Education, The Kids Are All Right, Winter's Bone, Zero Dark 30, Selma, Lady Bird, Little Women, Nomadland, Promising Young Woman, Coda, The Power of the Dog, and Women Talking.
It's crazy how they're all so recent, minus like what, 3 or 4? Like they're all like,
yep.
Wow.
There's 4 in the 80s and 90s, and then everything else is 2000s and later.
Not to be rude, but so Coda and Little Miss Sunshine are very much at the bottom for me.
You hate a Sundance darling.
I guess I do.
Wow.
Well, technically, Promising Young Woman was at Sundance, right? It just
That's
got
true.
delayed, like, because of.
Yeah, that's true. But like one of those like indie movies that could like, you know, one of those kinds of things.
Was Winter's Bone Sundance also?
Seems like it would be.
I feel like it was. I like right off the top of my head, I would put Lost in Translation way up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same.
This is so weird because they're also recent. And I'm not like a recent movie like top person.
Right.
I would put The Piano up there.
Mm-hmm.
Lady Bird. And then Women Talking and Promising Young Woman. I would have to really think about all the other ones.
Yeah, that's tough. I don't know if I have a set number that I would put it at, but I would say somewhere in the middle for me, because I really love a lot of these movies, honestly.
Yeah, it's a great list.
Yeah. Like I would probably do like The Piano and Lost in Translation right at the top, and like Power of the Dog for me is
Power of the Dog
right
I'd put up there too.
Yeah.
God.
Lady Bird, obviously. Little Women for sure.
Little Women.
Nomadland I still love. So yeah, there's a lot there.
Women.
Not a lot of those I dislike.
Yeah. The Power of Women.
Right, there you go. That's the next one. The Power of Women.
Maybe that could win Best Picture.
Wow, The Power of Women. Directed by Nicole Kidman. All right. Let's see. Juan Carlos Ojano said, who is the closest from the Women Talking cast to getting a nomination?
I feel like it's Jessie Buckley, just because she was a previous nominee.
Yeah, and didn't she get a few precursor nominations too?
Yeah, like...
Not that always matters, but...
I also feel like she was like the very first name, and then Claire Foy kind of came up, but like it was always Jessie Buckley. And she was the bigger scene to me. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also he said, who would have been your personal pick to get a nomination from the cast if you could only pick one?
Claire Foy.
I think I agree. And I don't always love Claire Foy, to be honest.
You're all
but
just
I thought she was excellent.
Bunch of boys. I love the scene where like I just feel like she does a good job of being very big but also very small in Little Women or Little Women.
Well,
in Women Talking. But
yeah. Joey Gentili said Karen Black as Lydia Tarr or as Claire Foy's role in Women Talking. Are you familiar with Karen Black?
No.
Okay, well, she was in a movie called 5 Easy Pieces, which she was nominated for with Jack Nicholson. She's great. She's a lot of fun. We talk about her quite a bit on the Best Actress series. For me, I cannot see it for Lydia Tarr.
Corpses, and she's Myrtle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, in Nashville. Okay, I knew her. I just didn't know her name.
Yes. I could see her being an interesting role in Women Talking, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I can't see her as Lydia.
No. I could see her in like a Triangle of Sadness kind of role, just as like a outsized kind of character, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it would be very fun as Deirdre in Everything Everywhere.
That would be excellent.
Right?
That'd be very excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. Sorry that's not from Joey's list, but that's the answer.
Yeah, I can see the vision. Lila said, which actresses, just in general, would you cast in an old Hollywood version of Women Talking?
That's so hard to think of. I would.
Yeah, because I don't know if like A-listers would have been great. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
That's like the thing now is we have so many actresses that are like not like only known for being leading ladies, so it's easier to do like a ensemble.
Yeah.
I would probably say I feel like Jane Fonda would be really good at Claire Foy's part.
Yeah, I could see that. Definitely. The Spirited. Yeah, definitely. I mean, just thinking of like character actors too, like Thelma Ritter would be really interesting, like Shelley Winters, Anne Baxter from All About Eve.
Yes. Wow.
I could even see like a young Elizabeth Taylor, maybe, like before she became a huge A-lister. That sort of thing.
It's hard with like ensembles like that.
Right. Let's see. Gio said, I remember a point when there was a clear top 8 everyone was predicting, and the last 2 slots were a mystery. Who do you think just barely managed to sneak in, and what made them stand out above the rest?
For sure, Triangle of Sadness and Women Talking. And I just think it's like you said, there was the international body that was very hyped on Triangle of Sadness, especially like Europeans. And then Women Talking, I do think there was like passion behind Women Talking. Like people wanted to recognize it in some way. They just like didn't know where. But that was definitely like, especially it being a W, I was holding my breath. I was
And we could have had a scenario where like only a film only gets a Best Picture nomination, like The Woman King. That could have been a possibility. That's its own narrative there.
Don't remind me.
Yeah. I would also like to throw out here, I don't know if you'll agree with this. Yes, Women Talking was one of those bottom 2. I might say, based on Triangle of Sadness getting director and screenplay, that it could have been in the top 8, and I might argue that Avatar,
that's a good one, actually,
was down there
because it underperformed with nominations, and it just didn't. Like outside of visual effects, what were you going to give it? Like so, and I don't think it had like the passion that the first one had behind it.
No.
Yeah, and once again, that's what the money's for.
There you go. Our friend Cody Derricks said, how close were we to a picture nomination for The Whale? / how lucky are we that that didn't happen, spoiling an otherwise well-received set of nominees?
I can't tell you how many times I wake up thankful it didn't get a Best Picture nomination. And as someone who is working on replacing in her bio that Darren Aronofsky is her favorite director because this movie ruined him for me.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm so thankful. It was very close, though, I do think. Like, I don't really know if it was number 11, but I feel like it was, like, floating between, like, 11 and 13. Like, I just feel like there were a lot of movies that were very close to getting in.
Yeah. I will admit that I was predicting it to be nominated for Best Picture, especially after it got the PGA nomination.
I don't know if it's because I just was like, I hate this movie so much that I was willing it to not get a nomination. But
so anti-dicting it.
Yes. I kind of always had it like a 12, I think. Like, I don't think I ever put it up higher. And I don't know if I was like, no, but like, I just, there's like it's like a combination of things. Like, it's set in one room primarily. Like, it's very cold. Like, nothing giant really happens. Like, I do think, and it's also like it's very divisive. Like, whereas all the other movies, I feel like people were very like, outside of Elvis, I feel like people were like, this is fine about most of the movies in the lineup. Whereas like The Whale, like there were people like me who just like, I hate this movie with every ounce of my being. And those movies have a harder time getting in. And like the other movies on the outskirts were like movies like Glass Onion, Women Talking, where it was like there were people who like actively hated them. So it was like, I just didn't see it in the cards, but it was very close, like so close.
Yeah, I feel very grateful that The Whale is not here. To keep this short, I will just say that it is an extremely misguided film.
Wrong director, wrong screenplay, wrong everything.
And it does also pain me to say that because I also normally do like Darren Aronofsky, and this was not it.
Quite a departure from his previous films for me.
Derogatory. Yes. Scott Kernan said, what do you think was number 11 and 12 for Best Picture? I would say The Whale, honestly. It has to be one of those. It won actor and makeup. Just saying.
That's very true. I haven't thought about this in so long. I do think Glass Onion was up there.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like, I didn't really love Glass Onion. Oh, After Sun.
Maybe.
Because I think she was pretty up there in director, to be honest.
Or screenplay too.
Yeah. I think like After Sun was in the the wings, just waiting, and nothing really came to fruition.
Yeah.
But I think she was on the bubble in a lot of places.
Yeah. I mean, Black Panther gets 5 nominations, so it was maybe
Black
in
Panther
the discussion.
Was probably like 13 or like 12.
Yeah. Can we say Babylon? Should we say Babylon?
In my heart, Babylon won Best Picture, so
okay, well, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just say 2 movies that people violently hated, The Whale and Babylon.
Yes.
But did have their defenders. But, yeah. I don't know, RRR, potentially, but that kind of bombed, so.
Well, we know it wasn't Pinocchio, so.
Yeah.
Actually, Black Panther's a really good one because it also, like, pulled off a win. Yeah. And it did have all those nominations. Yeah, I would probably say, like, that's weird. I can't say Glass Onion and Black Panther, like 2 sequels. It was probably Black Panther and The Whale.
Wow. 2 very different movies.
Yeah. Wow.
Let's see. Mr. Entertainment said, a field of 10 reduces the likelihood of a major snub. Which film not making it was the biggest shocker?
I don't know. I feel like I wasn't really shocked by anything not making it this year.
I wasn't either.
I think because we had that like solid 8, and then it was kind of like those last 2 spots were open, that it kind of just felt like nothing was really. I do think if you went back and told someone like before we saw the movies or had reactions that Damien Chazelle would miss again, I feel like that's very shocking.
Yeah, but especially for a movie about Hollywood.
Yeah, like the premise of it. But and once we saw I wasn't really shocked about anything this year.
Anthony Lucero said, do you think the PGA is a good way of telling who will get a nomination? I know this last year, 3 films got a PGA nom for Best Picture, but not at the Oscars. Usually they get 9 out of 10. Why do you think it was 7 out of 10 this year?
I think because we had 2 movies that were giant box office successes, like Avatar and Top Gun, and we normally like don't always count those in, but those movies were part of it, and I feel like they were kind of like not like scrambling, but they were like, what are the smaller movies we could identify? And like it was The Whale, and it's like that was just weird, but that movie performed well at the box office for a bit, so it makes sense. And I think like I've kind of backed away from thinking PGA is like this end all be all, because like there are so many more international voting bodies or like members in the body now, and I think they vote very differently than PGA. I do look at PGA for like the winner, but not the nominees specifically. Like obviously it's important, but not the end all be all I used to think it was.
Yeah. I mean, this year we had Black Panther, Glass Onion, and The Whale were the ones that all missed. I just think the Oscars tend to skew a little snobbier. Snobbier sounds like the wrong word, but like sort of that. I think in general it's a good sign of like what the 5 to 7 top movies are in like the upper tier.
Yeah.
So there's that. But like you said, the win for PGA is very important because of the preferential ballot. You know. Isaiah Washington said, what do you think makes the Academy so drawn to the Black Panther films over other comic book adaptations?
Well, as someone that's the only Marvel movies I've actually seen, I think because like there's like a craftsmanship to it that I don't notice in the other ones. But I will say, the sequel really lost me. It spent so much time setting like with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Like I was very confused. I don't think.
Yikes.
I don't even know if they're making a third one, but I won't see it at this point. It's gone too far into the first one felt like a standalone film, whereas this one deeply felt like connecting I don't know. The first one
part
felt,
of the TV show.
Yeah, the first one did really feel like a Ryan Coogler film, and I'm not saying that this one didn't. It just felt like he didn't have as much control as he had over what Marvel kind of like put into the movie as he did with the first one.
Yes.
And I think that was why they recognized them, but I think like they're kind of going in the wrong direction with it.
Yeah, definitely. I just think there's a more casual, friendly approach to the Black Panther films. I think it just is able to resonate beyond like superhero comic book fans. It's also like this great celebration of Black culture, Black artistry. It's about legacy. Like I feel like it gives the actors a little bit more opportunity to actually act, So I think that's why we have like an Angela Bassett nomination. Like, I don't think any other Marvel film would even be in the discussion for something like that. So I think it's the Ryan Coogler factor,
For sure.
Kareem Balak said, with all that it had against it with its box office and mixed reception, how close do you think Babylon got to a Best Picture nomination?
It was probably like 13.
I would say still like top 15 at least, right?
Yeah. I think if it had won something, I would have said like it was 12 or something, just because of the pedigree and like the fact that it was about the industry. But I also think a lot of people, especially older people, watched it and didn't see it as he came around to loving, like he still loves movies and he still feels that way about them. I think that they thought it was just like this searing, like this industry's awful movie. And like that's how they walked away from it. But when it's reevaluated, people will see.
Yep. They'll all see.
I'm a Babylon truther. I have a basement where I tweet about it from. I love that movie so much.
Babylon apologist.
That's me. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, it had a lot of haters, but I do think there were probably enough who were passionate about it, like you, and sort of like me, not to the same extent, but still much more on the positive side, that it could have been close. Like, I just feel like there's nothing in between. Like that's the issue. Like it's either you're number one or number two, or you hate it completely. So it's tough position to be in there.
Bad day.
Celluloid Siren said, this is just a general Oscar question, I guess. Do you think 10 nominees in this category is too much?
I actually don't, because I think like we get way more content than we ever used to. And I think 10 is like the lowest number, but I also think it's like the highest. Like I would never want them to increase it because that feels too much. But I do think like given the amount of places we can watch movies from, that it feels appropriate. And like it does help include more populous films versus years in the past, especially when it was 5, where it was more artsy fartsy, you could say.
Yeah, for better and for worse. I like a clean 10. I also like a clean 5. I was always a little iffy about like the sliding scale thing where
I never liked that.
Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 9, who knows? I don't like the mystery of that. Personally, I do sometimes prefer 5 just because that's like what I grew up with, and it feels a little less unwieldy, I suppose. But I also definitely think like getting a Best Picture nomination does help most films in their legacy for the most part. So it was probably a net positive that they made it 10 at this point. For most films, I think it benefits them box office wise and just with visibility. So I'm fine with it being what it is now.
As long as it never slides again. I was not a fan.
Yes, no more slides. Kareem Balak said, which of the nominees do you think will be the most bewildering one for future Oscar enthusiasts? I assume of the Best Picture 10 is what Kareem is talking about, but what do you think? I
mean, I hope it's Triangle of Sadness, but I think it might end up being Elvis.
Yeah.
But Elvis
possibly.
Still feels like there's always like a biopic kind of movie, and I feel like that's it.
True.
Triangle of Sadness.
Yeah. I agree. For some reason, even though as of right now it's almost like universally acclaimed by moviegoers, I wonder if it might be Top Gun Maverick.
I didn't even remember it was nominated for a second.
Well, there we have it.
Because I feel like as time goes on, people, especially younger people that look back, they won't know what COVID did. Like they won't really know that was the one that brought people back, because if they're looking at just numbers, they'll be like, we had Spider-Man, whatever, home, and they'll say
Spider-Man, whatever home. Exactly.
they'll still think that movie saved movie theaters and not realize it was just like an outlier, but like it was really Top Gun that like got the momentum going, so they won't understand it.
Right.
That's a good answer. I just literally forgot it was nominated.
Wow. Yeah, I think that could be like a you had to be there kind of nomination. Maybe same with the Avatar sequel. I don't know. Maybe.
What if
we'll see how its legacy is.
What if the third one is like it gets like picture director? Like, what if it goes big?
It's like The Return of the King.
Yeah.
Would love to see it. I don't know what the subtitle is. I think the last I heard it was
The
Seed Bearer, which
they gotta change.
We might have to workshop that title, James. Yeah, I think most of these others will be probably understandable to an Oscar enthusiast. Yeah, we'll see. One last one from Joey Gentili. He had many questions. Former Best Picture nominees / winners, West Side Story, Ben-Hur, etc. don't usually win on a remake nomination. All Quiet has been the closest that's come to fruition. It seems Fiddler on the Roof will be the next Best Picture nominee to be remade. Will it break the curse?
I don't think so.
I will just add, there is still time as of this recording that The Color Purple could break the curse.
That's what I was thinking. I feel like The Color Purple seems, if we get it this year, hopefully.
Right. Yeah.
I think, I don't know. And every time I've seen that trailer in a theater, like I see people like murmuring about it and they're really like into it. So I don't think that trailer is even just geared towards people who are paying attention to like movies. Like I feel like it has like really wide appeal. And I also think like the cast is full of recognizable people, which will help it box office wise. And if it really comes out at like Christmas time, like that is a great movie to take your parents to, like your family to, when you're at home visiting. And it has like that pedigree, like that 3 in a row, like produced by Oprah, Steven Spielberg, and Quincy Jones. That's
what a flex.
That's quite a flex, man. I think like as of right now, that's what I'm pretty sure my own personal predictions. That's what I have. It's like I think I have it at number 2 in picture. I have Killers at number 1 for the time being until I'm scared to make any real predictions. Who knows what's going on? But I really think that's like a real possibility of breaking that stat, because
I think so.
Sight unseen, it has all the pieces.
Right.
Yeah.
And bringing it back to the discussion of what is Oscar bait, they seem to be liking, as of late, ensemble-based films more and more, especially stories about family and relationships, things like that. So I could definitely see Color Purple doing that. But honestly, to bring it back to Fiddler on the Roof, I could see that doing very well if it's done right. Either way, curious to see how A Fiddler on the Roof in the 2020s is treated. So I think, one of those two could be closer than others that have come out in the past to doing it. But we'll see.
We will see.
A few more questions here. We got a lot of questions because people had a lot to say. Best Picture Cast said, had this been a Best Picture race in the 5 nominated films era, what would your personal 5 nominees have been out of these 10?
Oh, Tar, Elvis, Banshees. What am I missing? Avatar?
Mm-hmm.
What else is there? Oh, Women Talking.
Okay. I was like waiting for that.
I think it's my winner. I didn't think about it.
That's fair. I think my personal favorite of the 5 would be Everything Everywhere, Tar, Banshees, Women Talking, and The Fabelmans just eking in there.
I also think that could possibly be minus, like if you sneak in All Quiet, like if it was 5, that's what it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oscar H said, if the sliding scale was used this year instead of the full 10, what movie do you think would have missed out?
Triangle of Sadness. No, Women Talking.
Women Talking.
Yeah. I just don't want it to be.
Yeah. And I feel like that's probably it.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately. I don't know if there's any. Yeah, we'd probably get 9. Final question from KFleet208. Who do you think number 3 through 10 were ranking? Like, how did they come in the preferential ballot?
Banshees.
I agree on that.
I don't know, because nobody else really won anything. Tar? Or The Fablemans?
I would say Top Gun Maverick. Maybe, just because it made people feel good. I would say Tar 5 for me. Then The Fablemans after that.
I would probably put Elvis then The Fablemans, because Elvis, I feel like Elvis could have won costume design. So people were like a little, like, I just don't see, what was The Fablemans? It would have had to be like 2 in something for me to believe the passion was there. Yeah. This is so weird, because it just felt like such a 1 through, like, Banshees is really obviously 3, like we were talking about, and everything, so that makes sense. But after that, I just have no idea. What a weird year.
I know.
Yeah.
Triangle of Sadness, I guess, would be 7. I'd say Women Talking 8, just because of the screenplay win. I think it was raised up a little bit. I put Elvis at number 9. I don't know if that's too low, but
no,
I just when I saw the wins, when I saw the wins and the lack of wins, I should say, that it should have gotten, I took that as a sign, and then I put Avatar at the bottom.
That makes sense,
because I just didn't see people putting that number 1.
I should have just put it at number 1. Led the campaign.
That would be interesting. Let's get to our next segment, and that is our Should Have Been a Contender. So we can just briefly talk about any other films. We kind of have interspersed that a little bit already in our discussion, but did you have any others that you think deserved Best Picture nominations?
Obviously, Babylon. I just think that I love a big scale movie, and I love movies about movies, and what a film. I also really think She Said would have been a great nominee. I was really upset I couldn't pull off an adapted screenplay nomination, just because I think it's a great screenplay. I was a little nervous about this story being made into a film so soon after the real events took place, but I think that it was much more like a journalism film versus like an expose on like anything that really took place or deciding anything. And I think it was really important that we got to see that, like, from a team of women brought to the screen by like 2 actresses that I think are really like passionate about ensuring like a safe workplace for people. I think it was like a really great, like, seeing Zoe Kazan involved in that storytelling was really just perfect. Obviously, I just don't think the Academy was ready to embrace a film about that story. Because everyone that I know that has seen it has really said that's like way better than they anticipated, and I think that movie had a lot
That's how I felt.
Yeah, it had a lot of like really interesting things to say, and I do think, even though it's like a more subtle film, I think the direction's really exceptional in that movie, and I think that I think people just didn't watch it, to be honest. And if you're listening and you're one of those people, it's on Peacock right now. So stop watching Real Housewives and Vanderpump and watch She Said.
Wow. What a jarring transition.
And then I would also include After Sun. I just think that was just like a once in a lifetime kind of film. It's really like remarkable the way she pulled it off and the performances in it. And I love everything I've read about how they protected Frankie on set from like the deeper undertones of it. And great movie. I'm very excited to see what Charlotte does next.
Yeah. That's another one for me. Sort of like The Fablemans, as weird as that is to say, where it just feels like so close to home and like sensitively told that it's almost like uncomfortable to watch at times because of how vulnerable it is. But yeah, I totally agree. I'm glad Paul Mescal eked out a nomination.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's crazy that lead actor, 4 out of 5 great nominations, only bad one won.
Yeah, doesn't that happen? Way too often, though. Yeah, love those picks. I also wanted to stump for Saint-Omer, which was the, I believe, French submission, I think, for international film. about the trial of this woman who's accused of killing her young daughter. And the way it plays out, it's such a deliberate pace, but it's just like, it is very engrossing and is entirely intentional. And I think it really gives the audience a lot to think about. And I do think it's a great alternative to some of the more sensational true crime stories and movies out there that come out all the time nowadays.
I completely agree. I love that movie so much.
I also want to talk about a documentary that did get a nomination, but I think should have been considered for Best Picture, and that is All the Beauty and the Bloodshed.
I love that movie so much.
Which is really affecting, all about Nan Goldin, the artist and activist, and all the stuff with the AIDS crisis in the past and the Sackler family activism in the present, I think is just so brilliantly woven together. Glad it got the nomination documentary, but I wish it could have won, honestly, and I wish that the Academy would recognize more documentaries in Best Picture. And by more, I mean any, ever.
I completely agree.
Really liked RRR a lot. I think that would have been a fun addition to this lineup. I love that it kind of became its own little phenomenon. I really love Decision to Leave. Park Chan-wook is a master. I really wish that could have been his entry into the Oscars finally after all this time, but we're still waiting on that. Tong Wei, I think, is brilliant and should have been nominated for Best Actress.
Agreed.
As far as I'm concerned. Just another one of his very sort of thorny, fascinating, stories about relationships that I just eat up.
I love that movie so much. And would have been a great editing nomination.
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely.
Just like, I would have also included Bones and All.
Mm-hmm.
Should have been a sound nominee. Sorry to Top Gun Maverick. But I really love that movie was so tender, and I feel like it had so much to say. And I was sad we couldn't pull off a Mark Rylance nomination also.
That would have been such a wild nomination. But I would love to see it. Yep, I agree. That and after like A24. What a year.
After Yang, I know it came out so early, but and I know a lot of people saw it the year before, but I think that was my number one movie until I saw Bones and All in October. Mm-hmm. And what a beautiful film. And my preferred Colin Farrell performance.
Yeah, I think he's excellent in both, but again, very sensitive and love that. Also loved Eternal Daughter.
That was my number one movie of last year.
Okay, well there you go.
Loved that movie so much. There's something about Joanna Hogg's storytelling that just really works for me. But I loved Tilda Swinton in that movie, Double the Power. Yeah. Beautiful film.
I know. She's otherworldly, literally.
Literally.
The only other one I wanted to mention is Nope, which I thought was another great Jordan Peele movie for me that really is combining a lot of his skills and then, kind of leveling up a little bit and being into a Spielberg territory. Really like that. Great Keke Palmer performance. Great Stephen Yeun performance.
I also really love Daniel Kaluuya in that movie just because I feel like he does a lot subtly, and I feel like he's just so good at that. He's so great at you can always tell something's going on that he's thinking about his next move.
Yeah.
And love him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, that should have been a sound nomination. I will never.
For sure.
Yeah, I'll never understand that one.
Yeah. And it's kind of is it a horror movie? Is it sci-fi? Is it somewhere in between? I don't know. Either way, this is my soapbox for saying horror movies deserve tech consideration.
It's astonishing that we still have to ask for it, but here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any others that you wanted to mention before we get to our last segment?
I don't think so. The Eternal Daughter would have been so good. Are you kidding?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't think it was anywhere close to consideration, unfortunately. But
I think it made $1,000 and it was all from us.
Yes, there are dozens and dozens of us. Yes. Okay. Well, let's get to our final segment where we will discuss whether we think Everything Everywhere deserved its Best Picture win, or if we would have given it to All Quiet on the Western Front, or as a secret third option, if it should have been another film. So, Kenzie, what is your verdict here? Between the two first, and then opening it up to the 10.
I think I would still give it to Everything Everywhere, because I feel like, for me, I want a Best Picture winner that stays with you, or you still think about, even if it's like a negative way, I guess you could say, like, as long as like there's something to dissect with it. There is something to dissect with All Quiet, but I don't think it has the same emotional impact that Everything Everywhere has. Not even just like on me or you, but just like in general. I feel like people will discover that movie and it'll mean something to them, whereas I don't think that's really the outcome with All Quiet.
I very much agree. Obviously, Everything Everywhere is my number one of the lineup in general. I think it was the movie of the year, like I've said many times. I do think it is a rare Best Picture nominee or winner nowadays that actually feels like a movie of its year.
Yeah.
In the sense that, like, Coda, I don't think really was that. I sort of think it is Nomadland, but I don't know if that's really had enough lasting impact yet to say whether it was. Parasite, yes. Green Book, definitely not. Shape of Water, even though I like it, not really. You know, I feel like sometimes we don't get those like movie of the moment things winning Best Picture. And I think this was a great example of that. So it made money, it was a critical hit, and it won Best Picture.
The trifecta.
Here we are. And then, of course, there was backlash, as all great art has. So we will see how time treats Everything Everywhere. But as of now, it still seems to be in a pretty good territory. Yeah, I don't know if an All Quiet win would have aged particularly well. I'll just say that.
I feel like we would still be talking about how bad the win is. Like, if there would be an article every week still.
Yeah. Yep. And I feel like that was almost the case with 1917 and Parasite.
We got lucky both times.
Yes. But you would probably vote for Women Talking of the 10?
Probably, yeah. And then Tar.
Yeah, Tar would be my number 2. So in our own preferential ballot, Tar would be the winner. So there's that.
Lovely.
Yes.
Peace of mind.
Well, Kenzie, thank you so much for doing this. This was a blast, honestly. I don't feel like I felt any kind of real trauma from this. Outside of a few things, this was just a fun relitigating of an era that I think will be looked back on with some fondness compared to other Oscar races. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But did you have any other thoughts?
None. Just I'm very excited to talk about this right before festival season kicks off. And we have a whole new season to...
The cycle starts anew.
We're such masochists, you know, like doing this every year. It's crazy. Crazy.
Never ends. Yes. But truly, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
Well, tell people where they could find more of you on the internet.
You can find me personally at Kenzie Vanunu on every platform. And then also I write and run Oscar Central, which is at Oscars_Central. And yeah, I'm very excited to have been on here to dissect this season right before we kick off our new season.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for listening. You can find me at Kevin_Jacobson and the show's at Oscar Runner Up. Instagram at And the Runner Up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you heard and want to hear more, go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes, including our lovely chat about Gone Girl. And so, a brand new season of the Best Actor series is fast approaching, covering the lineups of the 1980s. The season premiere will be on September 27th, so look forward to that. So until then, thanks again, Kenzie, and I will bid you all adieu.